Chapter 3440. Towards this question, Ji Tianqing smiled, but did not answer. Heaven's will divine king raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Forget it. This must be your secret. If you're unwilling to say, then forget it." This king was rude. Pausing for a moment, he cupped his hands towards Ji Tianqing and said in a sincere tone, "Young Master Tianqing, before meeting you, this king had always been confident in his attainments in smithing. Be it lesser divine blacksmith or medium divine blacksmith, this king rarely met a match. Until today, when I met you and saw you refine this dragon concealment divine armor with my own eyes, this king knows that there's always someone better. Your understanding of the way of smithing, as well as the application of smithing techniques, has broadened this king's horizons. At the same time, you have also helped this king open up a path to continue improving my smithing attainments. For today's competition, this king admits defeat and admits defeat. Furthermore, this king is sincerely convinced. In front of everyone, Heaven's will divine king admitted defeat with a sincere attitude. Even so, he did not feel embarrassed at all. Instead, he was in a good mood, because watching Ji Tianqing refine had indeed given him inspiration. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, "Heaven's will divine king need not be humble. Among the ancient race disciples of your generation, your smithing attainments are already very outstanding." To outsiders, this was just a polite remark to console Heaven's will divine king. But when Heaven's will divine king heard this, his body shook and he looked at Ji Tianqing with deep meaning in his eyes. He did not show any abnormalities and asked, "Young Master Tianqing, do you want 4 pieces of King Gray Divine artifacts or the corresponding smithing materials?" Ji Tianqing said without hesitation, "I still want materials." Heaven's will divine king revealed an as expected expression and laughed self-deprecatingly. As expected, the divine artifacts this king refines cannot enter young master's eyes. Finished speaking, he took out 42 sets of king-grade materials from his interspatial ring and placed them in front of Ji Tianqing. There were all sorts of smithing materials with strange appearances and were all rare. Each set of materials shone with a dazzling divine light and emitted powerful divine power fluctuations. Ji Tianqing didn't stand on ceremony. He waved his hand and shot out a white light, collecting all the materials into his spatial ring. Presently, he already possessed over 70 sets of equipment refinement materials, and he only needed to spend a little more time to refine 7 King Gray Divine artifacts. He had already achieved his goal of coming to Fire Dragon Mountain this time, and he had gained a lot. Compared to searching for treasures in secret realms, this method was simply too fast. The dozens of divine lords outside the Grand Hall watched with their own eyes as Heaven's will God King admitted defeat and gave Ji Tianqing the refining materials. Their anxious hearts finally settled down. They finally saw the results, and the results were within their expectations. Everyone no longer had any worries and wanted to leave. The Heaven's will God King also spoke in a timely manner. "Today's challenge is over. All of you may leave. You don't have to come again in the future. This king is very disappointed in the Fire Mulberry territory and will leave tomorrow." When the dozens of divine lords heard this, they felt a deep sense of regret and reluctance. However, they were unable to influence Heaven's will God King's will, nor could they change the outcome. They could only leave with regret. 10 breaths later, the dozens of divine lords all left. Everyone gradually walked further and further away, still transmitting voice to discuss today's competition. The fascinating showdown of the 3 divine craftsmen let them feast their eyes, widen their horizons, and also learn many things. Inside the palace, only Heaven's will God King and Ji Tianqing 3 people were left. Peace was restored. Ji Tianqing was just preparing to take his leave, but the Heaven's will God King stopped him and said, "Sir Tianqing, please hold on." Ji Tianqing raised his brows and asked, "Is there anything else?" The Heaven's will God King smiled faintly and said, "Previously, this king guessed that Sir should be a descendant disciple of an ancient clan too. Hearing Sir's words earlier, this king became even more certain." Talking up to here, He revealed a pondering look and said while pacing, "Let this king guess. Sir Tianqing is a disciple of the Raging Flame Grotto? Or from the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect? Or perhaps Sir is a disciple of the Nangong clan?" Ji Tianqing raised his brows and asked with interest, "How can you be certain that this king is a descendant of an ancient clan? And why would you think of the Raging Flame Grotto, under Refinement's ancient sect, and Nangong clan?" Seeing that he did not deny it, the Heavenswell God King became even more certain and said with a faint smile, "This king's talent is shallow, and my knowledge is limited. Currently, I only know that there are 18 ancient clans on the continent. And among the many ancient clans, Raging Flame Grotto, 100 Refinement's ancient sect, and Nangong clan are the most proficient in the Tao of artifact refinement. But this king can't be certain which clan Sir is from." The Heavenswell God King spoke with assurance, and Ji Tianqing responded with ease. The two of them had outstanding demeanors, appearing rather mysterious and noble. But Chao Qingyu and Yank looked at each other, revealing a confused look, completely unable to understand what the two of them were talking about. Ji Tianqing stared at the Heavenswell God King and shook his head with a faint smile. "The three clans you mentioned have nothing to do with this king." I can't say that they are completely unrelated. There are still some interactions and grudges." The Heavenswell God King was stunned for a moment, then nodded slightly and said, "If that's the case, this king's knowledge is indeed shallow. Sir's clan must be very mysterious and low-key. Is it not among the 18 clans that this king mentioned?" Seeing that the Heavenswell God King was persistent and wanted to get to the bottom of the matter, Ji Tianqing hurriedly changed the topic. "Heavenswell God King, if this king did not guess wrongly, your surname should be Jiang, and you are from the Jiang clan, right?" The Heavenswell God King's eyes widened slightly, becoming even brighter. "That's right. This king, Jiang Tianyi, is the Jiang clan's 36th generation disciple, the Jiang clan's current 9th young master." "How did Sir deduce this? You must have a deep relationship with the Jiang clan, right?" Ji Tianqing nodded and smiled. "This king and the Jiang clan can be considered to have some friendship. From your attire, hairstyle, and accessories, as well as your artifact refinement techniques, bloodline talent, and so on, it's not hard to discern your identity as a Jiang clan disciple." The Heavenswell God King became more and more spirited when he heard that. He laughed heartily and said, "In that case, Sir Tianqing is indeed an old friend of my clan. To be able to meet Sir here today and have a spar with Sir, it's truly extremely fortunate. If Sir doesn't mind, let us become sworn brothers with different surnames and help each other in the future." Without waiting for him to finish, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and interrupted him, asking with a smile, "What's your relationship with Jiang Chusheng and Jiang Chushao?" The Heavenswell God King answered without hesitation, "These two are elders of my clan, my second uncle and third uncle." The smile on Ji Tianqing's face deepened, and he spread his hands and said, "The two of them are your uncles. Then the two of us cannot become sworn brothers. Otherwise, the seniority will be messed up." "Ah." The Heavenswell God King was stunned and asked, "Sir Tianqing, what do you mean?" Ji Tianqing hesitated for a moment before opening his mouth to explain. "Originally, due to certain reasons, this king cannot reveal my identity. However, this king trusts the Jiang clan, so I'll make an exception this once. Listen up, but you must not spread it out, or it will bring disaster to both of us." The Heavenswell God King saw his solemn tone and nodded solemnly, saying, "Sir, don't worry. I'll definitely keep it a secret." Only then did Ji Tianqing relax and said with a smile, "Jiang Chusheng and Jiang Chushao are both this king's in-name disciples." "Ah." The Heavenswell God King was dumbfounded on the spot, his entire person stunned. After a long while, he recovered his senses and muttered to himself with an odd expression, "If that's the case, wouldn't you become my master grandfather? This is too unbelievable. No, Sir Tianqing, you aren't deliberately taking advantage of me, right?" The sudden secret seemed to contain a lot of information, causing the Heavenswell God King to be a little dazed. He sized up Ji Tianqing with an odd expression, unable to accept that this fellow who was younger than him was actually his master. Chapter 34:41. If it were other divine kings, saying that he was Heaven's will divine king's grandmaster. Heaven's will divine king would have flipped out long ago. Even if he did not finish the other party off, he would beat him half to death before talking. But this sentence came from Ji Tianxing's mouth. Furthermore, Ji Tianxing's expression and tone did not seem to be teasing or joking in the slightest. Heaven's will divine king could not tell whether it was true or false and was immediately somewhat uncertain. Although he could not accept this matter in his heart and was 80% certain that it was false. But he kept muttering in his heart, what if it was true? Thinking left and right for a long time, Heaven's will divine king still decided to inquire clearly before talking. He looked at Ji Tianxing and asked, Young Master Tianxing, since my clan's 2 elders are your in-name disciples, and you even stayed in my clan for half a year, then your relationship with my clan is not shallow. I should have heard of you before, right? May I ask which clan you are from? And when did you go to my clan? Ji Tianxing had long expected that he would get to the bottom of this, and did not hide it either, answering truthfully, I don't have a clan, and have always been wandering the world. The 4 seas is my home. I went to the Jiang clan. That was over 1,100 years ago. Back then, I was roaming the boundless heaven continent in order to search for pinnacle king-class materials to refine 2 divine artifacts. By chance, I saved your 2 uncles in the Starry Sky ancient path. They followed me to explore the Starry Sky ancient path and reaped bountiful rewards. They even avoided the pursuit of their enemies. Later, they learned that I was searching for a few sets of special materials and invited me to the Jiang clan as a guest, hoping to persuade the clan head to give me 2 sets of materials. At that time, the Jiang clan encountered a crisis and was somewhat troublesome. On account of the Jiang clan treating me rather sincerely, I took action to help resolve it, temporarily delaying the Jiang clan's crisis. Hearing up to here, Heaven's will divine king was shocked and agitated in his heart. He could not resist nodding and saying, I've heard of the Starry Sky ancient path before. It's one of the continent's 10 most dangerous forbidden lands. Furthermore, the Starry Sky ancient path has existed since ancient times until now. It's said that it leads to a world beyond the heavens. 1,100 years ago, my clan's 3 elders indeed brought 9 Jiang clan disciples to explore the Starry Sky ancient path. Unfortunately, I was in close seclusion at that time and did not catch that opportunity. Otherwise, I would have been able to meet you. Ji Tianxing shook his head, smiled, and said, At that time, the Jiang clan sent 3 elders and 9 young disciples. But in the end, only 2 elders and 4 disciples survived. It's not necessarily a bad thing that you missed that expedition. The Heavens Will God King was taken aback for a moment before he awkwardly replied, That's true. Back then, I was in seclusion. Since young Master Tianheng went to our tribe, we would definitely treat him warmly. Why haven't I heard my brothers mention you? Ji Tianxing answered, During that half a year, I stayed in the Jiang clan's heaven-drawing pagoda. Other than the patriarch, the protector, and a few elders, almost no one else has seen me. Not. Heaven's will divine king was stunned for a moment. Only then did he reveal a look of realization as he said emotionally, So that's how it is. The sky-leading tower is the most sacred and dignified tower of our race. It's said to be our clan's cornerstone treasure that has been passed down since ancient times. But I still don't know what secrets are hidden in the top 3 levels of the Heaven Draw Tower. That's right. Back then, our clan did encounter a huge crisis that nearly affected our clan's fate. Later, I heard from the elders that they encountered a benefactor who helped them. There was a mysterious expert of virtue and prestige who helped them resolve the problem, allowing our clan to tide over the crisis. For the past 1,000 years, the clan leader and elders have been grateful for that benefactor's kindness, calling him our clan's benefactor. So, that mysterious benefactor was you? Talking up to here, God Will Divine King's doubts were mostly dispelled. His eyes, when looking at Ji Tianxing, were filled with surprise, excitement, and reverence. What Ji Tianxing said just now was the Jiang clan secret. If not for the Jiang clan's upper echelons, it was impossible to know so clearly. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said with a smile, "It was nothing, not worth mentioning. Furthermore, I helped the Jiang clan, and the Jiang clan gave me 2 sets of top-notch materials. Actually, the Jiang clan doesn't owe me anything." "No, no, no." God will divine King hurriedly waved his hand and said earnestly, "To young master, it was nothing. But to our clan, it was a huge favor. If not for your help back then, our clan would have been, forget it, let's not talk about that. Young Master Tianxing, you are the Jiang clan's benefactor and also my elder. It's my fortune to be able to meet you here today. No matter what, please come with me to the Jiang clan and let them treat you well." Ji Tianxing shook his head gently and said, "The Jiang clan has already thanked me back then. You don't have to take it to heart. Furthermore, God's induction grotto heaven is too far from here. It will take at least a few months to get there. I still have other things to do. Since you can leave God's induction grotto heaven, you must be shouldering a mission as well. You shouldn't waste time." Ji Tianxing knew the Jiang clan very well. Although the Jiang clan was prosperous and had many descendants, they all lived in seclusion in God's induction grotto heaven and basically did not show their faces in the secular world. Unless the Jiang clan's elders and disciples had to carry out some mission, only then would they leave God's induction grotto heaven. God will divine King hurriedly explained, "Young master, you mustn't say that. Coming out this time, I'm indeed shouldering the mission set by the clan. I have to recruit a few young disciples for the clan and absorb some fresh blood. But this mission is seriously insignificant compared to you. If the elders in the clan knew that I met you, but didn't invite you to the Jiang clan as a guest, then I would have committed a huge mistake. At that time, not only will my father beat me up, second uncle, third uncle, and the few uncles would probably give me a good beating." God will divine King's attitude and tone were very sincere and earnest. Even if Ji Tianxing repeatedly declined, he was stubborn from start to end, insisting on inviting Ji Tianxing to the Jiang clan as a guest. "Young Master Tianxing, no matter what, I won't give up. Even if you don't go to the Jiang clan as a guest, I still want to follow you, serve you, and repay you for saving the Jiang clan's life. Only then can I report back to the Jiang clan and suffer less beatings and scoldings. Young master, just take pity on little Seven." Seeing God will divine King speak so pitifully, Chao Qingyu and Yank were dumbfounded. The two exchanged glances and could not resist discussing with voice transmissions. "My goodness, this kid is a middle-level god king. He actually needs to be beaten and scolded?" Hearing the situation they're talking about, that Jiang clan seems to be very powerful. If any random young disciple is a middle-level god king, then wouldn't the entire Jiang clan become a god king clan? In the past, I read in ancient books that there were as many divine lords as dogs in the ancient era, and god kings were everywhere. Back then, I thought it was nonsense, too exaggerated and bizarre. Looking at it now, it's our knowledge that is too shallow. Chapter 3442. Ji Tianxing could not dissuade Heaven's will God King. Seeing him so persistent, he could only agree for now. "Forget it. I'm heading south anyway, and God's induction grotto heaven is also in the south. I'll go take a look." Seeing Ji Tianxing finally relenting, Heaven's will God King was overjoyed and revealed a brilliant smile. "Great. Thank you for your understanding, young master, for helping me. There's no time to lose. Let's set off now." Having unexpectedly picked up a master grandpa, Heaven's will God King was very excited. He immediately wanted to leave Fire Dragon Mountain and return to God's induction grotto heaven to claim credit. After all, the Jiang clan's disciples were too outstanding. As one of the 9 most outstanding geniuses of the Jiang clan's younger generation, he actually felt a lot of pressure. Compared to the other 8 clan brothers, his talent was not the best. His divine Dao realm was not the highest. He was also not the most powerful in artifact forging and setting up arrays. Although his various abilities were very balanced, none of them were particularly outstanding. Therefore, he was considered the most gentle, ordinary, and mediocre among the 9 geniuses of the Jiang clan. But it was different now. He wanted to abduct this master grandpa back to the Jiang clan and make a great contribution. He could even imagine how happy and excited the clan head and elders would be when he brought the master grandpa back to God's induction grotto heaven. At that time, he would definitely be rewarded by the clan head, protectors, and elders, becoming the most dazzling one among the 9 geniuses. After all, the legend of the Master Grandpa saving the Jiang clan had been circulating in God's induction grotto heaven for thousands of years. Before long, Heaven's Will God King steered the dark golden palace and flew into the sky. That's right, this dark golden palace was not an ordinary building. It was a mid-grade, king-level divine artifact. After landing on the ground, it was a low-key palace. After flying into the sky, its appearance would change and become a divine ship. Of course, the interior space of a divine ship did not change. It was still the layout of the palace. Ji Tianxing and company stayed in the palace and were not affected at all. Heaven's Will God King focused on steering the divine ship, flying south as fast as a stream of light. He was in a good mood and even could not help but hum a tune. However, he would occasionally mutter a few words, some strange thoughts flashing through his mind. I no longer have any doubts about the authenticity of this Master Grandpa. He knows so much about the Jiang clan and is willing to follow me back to the Jiang clan. However, he was a little too young. Could it be that his cultivation technique has the effect of rejuvenating one's youth? More than 1,000 years ago, he was already able to roam the ancient path of the starry sky and help my 2 uncles fend off foreign enemies and ensure their safe retreat. Moreover, the clan leader, protector, and several elders were all extremely respectful to him and worshipped him greatly. This means that Master Grandpa is at least a high divine king. Furthermore, he's very proficient in the Tao of artifact refinement. He looks so young, but I wonder what realm his strength has reached now. His strength and aura were both very mysterious, as vast as the sea, making it impossible for others to see through him. I wonder where he is now. If he doesn't join any forces, do I have any hopes of inviting him to join the Jiang clan? Heaven's Will God King mumbled to himself along the way. After pondering for a long time, he finally decided to find an opportunity to understand Master Grandpa. In any case, Master Grandpa looked more amiable, not the kind of cold attitude that kept people 1,000 miles away. On the other side, in a side chamber of Heaven's Will Palace, Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank were all in a secret chamber. This secret chamber was set up with many king-level divine arrays that could isolate divine senses and all sorts of secret techniques. It was very secretive. Of course, Heaven's Will God King revered Ji Tianxing and would not casually spy on him. The secret chamber was dimly lit. Ji Tianxing sat in the middle, while Chao Qingyu and Yank stood on his left and right. The 2 of them had a bellyful of questions. Previously, with Heaven's Will God King present, it was not convenient for them to ask. Now, only the 3 of them were left in the secret chamber. The 2 of them looked at Ji Tianxing expectantly. Ji Tianxing glanced at the 2 of them and said calmly, "I know you must have a lot of questions. Ask whatever you want." Yank could not wait any longer and hurriedly asked, "Master, you and Heaven's Will God King are like playing riddles. What ancient clans and ancient clans? What's going on?" Chao Qingyu also hurriedly nodded and echoed, "That's right. I've lived in the boundless heaven continent for thousands of years. Why have I never heard of these?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "The so-called ancient clans and ancient clans are actually ancient clans that have survived from the ancient era until now. They have multiplied to become extremely powerful ancient clans. On the surface, the current situation in the boundless heaven continent is very stable. The Azura God Emperor unified the entire continent. He has more than 40 divine envoys and more than 100 domain lords under him. They're all God King experts. And below the domain lords are the various large empires and numerous divine kingdoms. But in reality, this is just the surface. The power structure of the continent is not so simple. The number of God King experts is also far more than this." Chao Qingyu and Yank both maintained silence, listening attentively. Their eyes revealed great interest. Ji Tianxing continued to explain. Under normal circumstances, the lifespan of a God King expert is 99,000 years. 30,000 years ago was the ancient era. In the ancient era, the number of God King experts was numerous. A gathering of heroes, countless major powers. Many pinnacle God King experts established sects and clans, concealing their strength and biding their time, multiplying and gradually strengthening. These sects and clans often occupied grotto heavens and blessed lands, grasping vast amounts of cultivation resources and an excellent cultivation environment. Therefore, their descendants had excellent aptitudes and outstanding talents. It was very easy for God King experts to be born. Over time, the number of God King experts in the various large ancient clans became more and more. Their forces also became greater and greater. Of course, their control over the grotto heavens and blessed lands became firmer and firmer. Gradually, no one could replace them. Chao Qingyu could not resist asking, "Grotto heavens and blessed lands? Like the Jiang clan's god attraction grotto heaven? What kind of place is that? Is it like the various secret realms on the continent?" Ji Tianxing explained, "It's a little similar to the secret realms, but it's not. The so-called grotto heavens and blessed lands have existed since the ancient era. They're like small worlds. They're not in the God realm, but they are attached to the God realm and are connected to the God realm. Every grotto heavens and blessed lands have 10 times more divine power and various resources than the God realm. It is a cultivation holy land that countless forces drool over. I reckon that even the God Emperor, who controls the continent, would be moved." Yang scratched his head and said awkwardly, "How many grotto heavens and blessed lands are there? Why have I never heard of them? Could it be that my status and strength are not enough?" "That's right. You know yourself well." Ji Tianxing nodded and praised him. "As far as I know, there are 72 grotto heavens and 36 blessed lands on the 4 continents of the God realm. I'm not sure if they have increased or decreased." Chapter 3443. Yang paused for a moment, then asked doubtfully, "My lord, can the blessed grotto heavens increase or decrease in size?" Ji Tianxing nodded. "Of course. I'm not too sure how the blessed grotto heavens are formed. But one thing is for sure, the blessed grotto heavens are just small worlds, not eternal worlds like the God realm. Since it was a small world under special and extreme circumstances, it could be damaged and destroyed. For example, back then, he wanted to say that the great battle of the gods 1,000 years ago originated from certain grotto heaven. At that time, there were several dozen God King powerhouses who engaged in a great battle in the paradise. They caused the paradise to be riddled with holes, almost destroying it. Of course, he was one of those godly kings, and he was the target of many godly kings' attacks. However, Ji Tianxing stopped halfway through his words. It was better not to reveal this matter. Chao Qingyu was full of anticipation, waiting for Ji Tianxing to continue. Yang saw that there was nothing else, so he urged Ji Tianxing anxiously. But Ji Tianxing just smiled and said nothing. The two of them were helpless and could only suppress their doubts. Yang stared at Ji Tianxing again and asked carefully, "My lord, since you entered the ancient path of the stars more than 1,100 years ago and saved the Jiang clan, then why are you here? That means you were already a top godly king expert back then. If that's the case, 1,000 years ago in the primal chaos continent, the godly king of the sword who competed with my father and uncle, was it you?" This question had been hidden in Yang's heart for far too long. There were many times when he wanted to find an opportunity to ask Ji Tianxing. Today, when he heard Ji Tianxing and Ji Tianxing's conversation, he was even more certain that Ji Tianxing was the godly king of the sword. But this was still his guess. He had to get confirmation from Ji Tianxing himself. The secret room fell silent, and the air froze. Yang and Chao Qingyu stared at Ji Tianxing, waiting for his answer. Although this question had nothing to do with Chao Qingyu, he had a guess in his heart that was similar to Yang's. Ji Tianxing glanced at Yang and said with a faint smile, You already have the answer in your heart. Why are you still asking me? Ugh. Yank was startled. He scratched his head and muttered, My lord, what do you mean? You admit it? Ji Tianqing smiled without saying anything. Yank turned to look at Chao Qingyu and asked through telepathy, Xiao Chaozi, does the lord admit it? Chao Qingyu couldn't help but roll his eyes and ignore him. The air was quiet again. Chao Qingyu had wanted to ask Ji Tianqing if the godly king who had enlightened him 1,000 years ago on the chaotic continent was Ji Tianqing. But Chao Qingyu had followed Ji Tianqing for so long that he was 70% sure. Now that he heard Ji Tianqing answer Yank, he had an answer in his heart. There was no need to ask anymore. It was all nonsense. But he still couldn't figure out a question. My lord, there's a question that bothers me. I can't figure it out. 1,000 years ago, you were already a high-level godly king, a top-notch expert. Why is it that you have just entered the divine king realm and are still a lower divine king? Yank was still puzzled by Ji Tianqing's words. He didn't understand what they meant. When he heard Chao Qingyu ask such an explosive question, he immediately shifted his attention and hurriedly nodded in agreement. That's right. My lord, I can't figure it out either. Ji Tianqing revealed a meaningful smile. His entire person became unfathomable. He explained, Actually, neither you nor Jiang Tianyi can see my cultivation level and background. But you two have followed me for a long time. You saw me break through to the second level of the godly king realm with your own eyes. So only the two of you and the people around me know my cultivation level. Chao Qingyu nodded. Yank nodded as well. But you still haven't told me how your cultivation level regressed. Could it be that your godhead was destroyed by a stronger godly king and you had to cultivate again? Only someone like Yin Ku, who didn't think before speaking, will be so blunt with his words. Chao Qingyu had a similar thought, but he wouldn't say it out loud. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said with a playful smile, Yank's explanation isn't quite accurate, but it's more or less the same. Yank and Chao Qingyu were shocked to hear this. Expressions of disbelief appeared on their faces. Heavens! My lord, I was just saying it casually. I didn't think it was true. Yank's eyes widened in shock and excitement. Young master, isn't this too unbelievable? Wouldn't one die if one's godhead was destroyed? How could one cultivate again? Chao Qingyu was calmer. He thought further and still couldn't accept this explanation. Before Ji Tianqing could reply, Yank glared at Chao Qingyu and said in a low voice, What are you talking about? Who is my lord? We've followed him for so long. Don't you know how monstrous and heaven-defying he is? What is impossible for us is not a problem for the Lord. Let not talk about the Lord recultivating. Even if he was reborn, I would still believe it. Chao Qingyu rolled his eyes again and sneered. Only a pig brain like you would believe in reincarnation. Do you think the 6 realms of reincarnation are fake? Do you think the heavenly laws are just for show? Yank stubbornly straightened his neck and said in a firm tone, I don't care about reincarnation or laws. I believe that there's nothing my lord can't do. Chao Qingyu was speechless. The atmosphere suddenly became quiet, and it was a little awkward. Chao Qingyu frowned and thought for a moment. Then he sneered, Hey, Yank, I've always thought that you were a blockhead. I didn't expect you to suddenly be enlightened. Your flattery is smooth. You're showing your true feelings. Seeing that the two were about to quarrel again, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and interrupted them. Quiet. This topic ends here. You must keep it a secret. When we reach the Jiang clan, you must not speak carelessly. That's an ancient clan with many godly kings. If you cause any trouble, you can imagine the consequences. Chao Qingyu and Yank's expressions were solemn. They hurriedly nodded to show that they understood. Please don't worry, young master. Qingyu knows what to do. Don't worry, my lord. I will not speak carelessly. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, All right, if you have nothing else, go cultivate in seclusion. After that, he took out the Juqian 10 Absolutes Pagoda and put Yank into the distorted space-time. Chao Qingyu was not in a hurry to enter his divine worship. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked worriedly, Young master, the Jiang clan must have a high-level godly king, right? With your strength and methods, Low-level and mid-level godly kings can't see through you. But if you meet a high-level godly king and they see through you, how will you explain it? Ji Tianxing waved his hand and revealed a mysterious smile. He said in a strange tone, "Since I dare to go to the Jiang clan, I naturally have my ways and countermeasures." Jiang Tianyi is still intoxicated. He's fantasizing about how he will be rewarded if he brings me back. Poor child, just don't cry in the future. Chapter 3444. Ji Tianxing's words stunned Chao Qingyu. Moreover, Ji Tianxing's face was full of smiles. It was especially teasing and meaningful. Chao Qingyu could not help but feel a chill down his spine. He asked worriedly, "Young master, do you have a grudge with the Jiang clan?" Ji Tianxing glanced at him and asked, "If I had a grudge, why would I bring you to the Jiang clan? Wouldn't I be walking right into their trap?" Chao Qingyu was stunned. He was confused. "What did you mean just now?" "Nothing. Don't think too much." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "Go and cultivate in seclusion." Seeing that he was unwilling to answer, Chao Qingyu was helpless. He could only give up. He bid farewell to Ji Tianxing and returned to the Green Jade, divine worship, to cultivate in seclusion. Ji Tianxing placed the Jiuqian 10 Absolutes Tower and the Green Jade, divine worship, on the stone table in the secret chamber. However, he also returned to the distorted space-time of the Divine Tower to continue crafting divine artifacts. Swoosh! When he returned to the Bloody Flame sacred tree, Yang had already entered a state of cultivation. Ji Tianxing flew to the Jiuqian cauldron and connected his mind to the cauldron to check the situation inside. Although he had left the distorted space-time and went to the Fire Dragon Mountain, he had wasted a lot of time. Fortunately, the array of the cauldron was working normally. The two divine swords in the cauldron were still intact. However, the cracks on the surface of the two divine swords had widened, and they were trembling even more violently. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing took out more than 70 sets of king-level crafting materials from his infinite space ring and arranged them in the air. I didn't expect to get so many king-level materials from just one trip to the Fire Dragon Mountain. This is much more efficient than exploring secret realms and treasure hunting. With these materials, I can craft a king-level divine artifact for Ku, Wushuang, and Bai Long each. In the future, when I go to the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven, I have to get more top-notch materials in case I need them. Ji Tianxing muttered to himself. The scene of the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven appeared in his mind. He also thought of the few rare treasures and looked forward to it. Soon, he picked out 3 sets of materials from the 70 sets and added them to the cauldron. These 3 sets of refining materials were all rare metals. They were extremely tough and malleable. Ji Tianxing's goal was to strengthen the 2 swords' toughness, and they could withstand more laws and restrictions. As expected, after adding 3 sets of materials, the cracks on the swords' back. Next, and Tianxing's assess the 3 materials. Only when the quality and strength of the divine sword was guaranteed did he feel at ease to inscribe the laws and restrictions. Time. Unknowingly, 3 months. More and Yuyu's. More S. Yuyu. Finally, the number of laws on the swords reached 300 and the number of restrictions reached 3,000. Without a doubt, the 2 mid-grade king-level swords have been refined. When Ji Tianxing stopped and opened the 9th Heaven Cauldron, 2 dazzling sword lights shot into the sky. Swoosh! Swoosh! The 2 swords flew into the sky, dragging long tails of flames. They were like 2 divine dragons circling in the sky. Hundreds of millions of sword lights flashed like stars. The vast and mighty divine sword chi fell like a downpour. The space-time was affected by the sword chi and started to fluctuate. Ji Tianxing looked up at the 2 divine swords that were dancing in the air and revealed a gratified smile. With these 2 swords, Yao Yao's combat power will increase by several times. Moreover, the sword's attributes and laws are very compatible with her. I'll call these 2 swords the Sun and Moon swords for now. Indeed, of the 2 swords flying in the sky, one was as golden as the sun, and the other was as silver as the moon. Even the aura emitted by the two swords was. One was blazing and violent, while the other was cold and restrained. After a while, when the aura of the two swords stabilized, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and put them away. Originally, he wanted to use this opportunity to refine another king-level divine spear for Ji Ku, but he calculated the time. 2.5 days had passed outside. Therefore, he left the distorted space-time and returned to the secret room in the Heavens Will Divine Palace. He opened the secret room and walked into the hall of the Divine Palace. There were many divine arrays in the hall. Among them, there was an array that controlled the flight of the Divine Palace. In these few days, Heavens Will Divine King sat cross-legged in the hall and focused on controlling the Divine Palace. The moment Ji Tianxing walked into the hall, Heavens Will Divine King was startled awake. He hurriedly asked, "Young Master Tianxing, why aren't you recuperating? From here to God's Guide Grotto Heaven, we still have to pass through more than 20 domains. It will take at least half a year. You can go into seclusion and cultivate." Ji Tianxing nodded and asked, "Where are we now? Have we left Sanglan Empire?" Heavens Will Divine King thought for a moment and answered, "Currently, we are already at the southernmost part of Sanglan Empire. We will reach the border in another hour. After passing Sanglan Empire's border, we will enter Fire Mulberry Empire." Ji Tianxing's eyes narrowed slightly and asked, "Fire Mulberry Empire is located in the middle of Fire Mulberry region. It is the core empire of Fire Mulberry region, right?" "That is of course." Heavens Will Divine King nodded without hesitation. Ji Tianxing asked again, "Heavens Will, how much do you know about Fire Mulberry region and Fire Mulberry Empire? How many divine king experts are there in the entire region? How many high divine lords are there in Fire Mulberry Empire?" Heavens Will Divine King answered without hesitation, "Although I have not been in Fire Mulberry region for long, I have only stayed for slightly more than a month. But I have investigated the situation beforehand. I have some understanding of Fire Mulberry region. Otherwise, I would not recruit disciples here. In the nearby 10 regions, Fire Mulberry region's faction is the strongest. This region has 4 divine kings. Other than the heavenly smelting divine craftsman, Fire Mulberry region Lord has 2 deputies. Fire Mulberry region Lord is called Bai Feng. His 2 deputies are a pair of Dao companions called Qinyi and Wu Shui. That's right, that Bai Feng has some background. He is a high divine king who has been famous for 20,000 years. His strength has reached the 7th stage realm. Furthermore, he seems to have the bloodline of the divine beast fire phoenix. He has the mysterious annihilation divine eyes. He can predict good and bad luck and calculate heaven's secrets. Most importantly, I heard that he seems to have the shadow of divine phoenix Grotto Heaven behind him. But I don't know if it is true or false. Anyway, I do not wish to interact with him, so I did not continue investigating. When he heard this, Ji Tianxing frowned slightly. His eyes were grave. He thought in his heart, Jing Fei Hong was killed. Golden Dragon Region Lord was exiled to the void. Stellar Aspect Divine Envoy also escaped with heavy injuries. Stellar Aspect Divine Envoy definitely hates me to the bone and will not let this matter rest. Even if he is heavily injured, he cannot chase after me. But with his identity, he should find other divine envoys to help and inform the various regions to intercept and kill me. Bai Feng's strength is so robust. He also has the relationship with Divine Phoenix Grotto Heaven behind him. If I were Stellar Aspect Divine Envoy, I would probably find him for help too, right? Pausing for a moment, his pupils suddenly constricted. He muttered to himself, Annihilation Divine Eyes can predict good and bad luck and calculate heaven's secrets. Chapter 34:45. Originally, Heavens Will Divine King and Ji Tianxing were chatting rather normally, talking about the White Phoenix Divine King and the Divine Phoenix Grotto Heaven. Ji Tianxing fell into deep thought, his eyes solemn. Heavens Will Divine King detected his odd expression and asked in concern, Young Master Tianxing, what's wrong with you? Is there a problem? Ji Tianxing came back to his senses and waved his hand and said, Nothing, don't worry. However, After entering the Fire Mulberry Empire, try your best to be more careful. No problem. Heaven's Will Divine King nodded his head in agreement, but asked worriedly, Young Master Tianxing, did you offend the White Phoenix Divine King before? Or do you have some grudge with the Divine Phoenix Grotto Heaven? Ji Tianxing thought to himself, if Divine Envoy Stellar Aspect really sent a message to the White Phoenix Divine King, he'll definitely make a move to help. He's the Fire Mulberry Domain Lord after all, the Azura God Emperor's subordinate. He naturally has to follow orders. As for the Divine Phoenix Grotto Heaven, back then, in order to temper my sword Dao, I broke through in a crisis. And also in order to find materials from the Grotto Heavens and Blessed Lands to refine all kinds of divine weapons, I trampled over the 72 Grotto Heavens and 36 Blessed Lands one by one. That old Fire Phoenix definitely hates me until he gnashes his teeth in hatred, right? Although he thought so in his heart, Ji Tianxing pretended to be nonchalant on the surface and explained to Heaven's Will Divine King, what grudge can I have with the Divine Phoenix Grotto Heaven? Rather, the White Phoenix Divine King might have been offended. After all, I trampled on the heavenly, smelting Divine Craftsman at Fire Dragon Mountain, making his face sweep to the ground, his prestige completely wiped out. I even won over 30 sets of king rank materials from him. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman was almost driven mad with anger. He definitely has a deep relationship with the White Phoenix Divine King. The White Phoenix Divine King might very well take action against me for the sake of the Fire Mulberry region's face. Heaven's Will Divine King thought about it and said with a nod, So that's how it is. Your worries aren't without reason. With the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's vengeful nature, he'll most likely find the White Phoenix Divine King for help. However, with your strength and means, what does a mere heavenly smelting divine craftsman count as? Even if the White Phoenix Divine King, you won't think much of it either. Although Heaven's Will God King could not see through Ji Tianxing's cultivation realm and background, Heaven's Will God King could not see through him. However, he firmly believed that this was because Ji Tianxing's cultivation level was too high. Moreover, the entire Jiang clan was in awe of Ji Tianxing. One could imagine that Ji Tianxing was absolutely a high-ranking divine king. Moreover, he was one of the best among the high-level god kings, an 8th or 9th stage god king. With such formidable strength, wouldn't they still do as they pleased in the boundless heaven continent? However, Heaven's Will God King was quick-witted as he hurriedly smiled and said, Young Master Tianxing, don't worry. Don't say that Divine King White Phoenix isn't your match. With me present, Divine King White Phoenix definitely won't dare to make things difficult for you. After all, our Jiang clan and the Divine Phoenix Grotto Heaven are both clans that are on par with each other. Divine King White Phoenix will definitely give me face. When the time comes, you don't have to worry about anything. I'll handle it. Heaven's Will God King guaranteed, rather confidently. It was also in order to perform in front of Ji Tianxing, so as to pull the relationship closer. Ji Tianxing knew what he was thinking. He just smiled and didn't say anything. All right, then you focus on steering the divine ship. I'll go to the hidden chamber to recuperate for a while. Finished talking, Ji Tianxing patted Heaven's Will God King's shoulder, turned around, and left. Returning to 2.5 days ago, Ji Tianxing won the Heavenly Smelting Divine Craftsman at Fire Dragon Mountain Summit and obtained over 30 sets of king rank materials. The Heavenly Smelting Divine Craftsman swallowed his anger and humiliation, carrying monstrous hatred and extreme humiliation, and left Fire Dragon Mountain in a sorry state. Not long after leaving Fire Dragon Mountain, he took out a transmission jade slip and sought help from the White Phoenix Divine King. Normally, his relationship with the White Phoenix Divine King was pretty good and also helped the White Phoenix refine many king-ranked divine artifacts. Furthermore, the various major empires' royal families and powerhouses also frequently had requests for him. The Heavenly Smelting Divine Craftsman believed that the White Phoenix Divine King would definitely help him take revenge. He explained everything that had happened in detail in his communication jade slip. After sending the message, he accelerated toward the Fire Mulberry Empire. 15 minutes later, at the northern border of the Fire Mulberry Empire, at the Manchuan Pass that was adjacent to the Sanglan Empire, there were several mountain ranges here, all extending for 1,000,000 miles. The mountains were steep, strange peaks and steep cliffs could be seen everywhere. And the Manchuan Pass was the most majestic and precipitous pass at the border. Inside this impregnable pass, there were 200,000 Fire Mulberry Empire troops garrisoned all year round. They were commanded by over 40 high-rank divine lords. A few days ago, the Fire Mulberry Emperor personally led the Imperial Guards, as well as over 100 divine lord powerhouses, and rushed to the Manchuan Pass to hold the fort. Yesterday, the unparalleled Region Lord, Divine King White Phoenix, also brought Qin Yi and Wu Shui, personally coming to the Manchuan Pass. The 200,000 troops guarding the Manchuan Pass were all dumbfounded. While excited, they also felt uneasy and suppressed. To them, for His Majesty the Emperor to personally come to the Manchuan Pass, it was already very inspiring. As for the Region Lord, that was even more unseen. To be able to see him with their own eyes, they were all fortunate of 3 lifetimes, enough to boast for a lifetime. But the garrison troops were not stupid. In these 2 days, high-ranked divine lords with high authority continuously rushed to the Manchuan Pass from all directions to gather. The atmosphere of the Manchuan Pass was very solemn, filled with killing intent like a storm was coming. The 200,000 garrison troops all had a premonition that something earth-shaking was definitely about to happen. Otherwise, there would not be so many experts and major figures gathered here. At the same time, in the commander's palace at the Manchuan Pass, Divine King White Phoenix, who is currently meditating, received a message from the heavenly smelting divine craftsman. He finished circulating his energy, held the transmission jade slip in his hand, and read the information inside with his divine sense. Originally, his expression was indifferent, and his bearing was dignified. When he finished reading the information inside the jade slip, his tightly furrowed brows immediately relaxed, and the corners of his mouth even revealed a smile. Hoo-hoo-hoo! Truly surprising, this is simply a pleasant surprise. Qin Yi and Wu Shui have been guarding Divine King White Phoenix's 2 sides all along. Seeing him suddenly reveal a smile, Qin Yi could not resist asking, "Your Excellency, Region Lord, what made you so happy?" Divine King White Phoenix weighed the transmission jade slip in his hand and said with a playful smile, "Originally, according to our estimations, those few foreign-race divine kings should have arrived at the Manchuan Pass today. But they didn't come after a long time. We waited here bitterly, even wondering if something went wrong somewhere. The result, guess what? Those few foreign-race divine kings actually went to Fire Dragon Mountain. Didn't the 2 of you say previously that a young divine craftsman taught the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's disciple a lesson at Fire Dragon Mountain?" Qin Yi and Wu Shui's eyes lit up, immediately revealing looks of pleasant surprise. "Your Excellency, could it be that you mean that those few foreign-race divine kings also went to Fire Dragon Mountain and challenged that young divine craftsman?" Divine King White Phoenix nodded his head and said with a playful smile, "Amen. Not only did they challenge the young divine craftsman, they even ruthlessly smacked the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's face. Not only did the heavenly smelting divine craftsman lose all face in front of his disciples and grand disciples, he even lost more than 30 sets of king rank materials. Look, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman just left Fire Dragon Mountain and sent this king a message for help, asking this king to help take revenge for him." Qin Yi's eyes immediately lit up, and he said with a heart full of pleasant surprise, "That's also to say that those few foreign-race divine kings went to Fire Dragon Mountain. That's why they were delayed. They need at least 2.5 days before reaching Manchuan Pass. We still have ample time to prepare and can gather even more manpower." Chapter 3446. Heavens will Divine King piloted the Divine Palace and sped through the sky. 100,000 miles ahead was Sanglan Empire's border. Crossing the undulating mountain range, they would enter Fire Mulberry Empire's borders. He remembered Ji Tianxing's exhortation and put away his sloppy attitude, becoming serious and focused. The Divine Palace's flying speed was neither fast nor slow. Defensive and investigative array formations were all activated, monitoring the situation in the surrounding tens of thousands of miles. He maintained caution, guarding against sudden situations that could occur at any time. Of course, he still could not help muttering in his heart, "Isn't Sir Tianxing too cautious?" Even if the heavenly smelting divine craftsman was viciously humiliated, he might plead with divine King White Phoenix. But the heavenly smelting divine craftsman isn't divine King White Phoenix's disciple. White Phoenix shouldn't go to war for him and personally take action to kill us, right? Heaven's will divine king felt that if divine King White Phoenix really took action, then his relationship with the heavenly smelting divine craftsman was definitely not ordinary. But no matter what, he would bring up divine induction grotto heaven and the Jiang clan to deter divine King White Phoenix. As long as divine King White Phoenix was not a brute, he definitely would not make things difficult for him and Ji Tianxing. At the same time, on the border of the two great empires, inside Manchuan Pass, the 200,000-strong army had long spread out, lying in ambush in the surrounding mountain range. The many garrison troops were in teams of 1,000, respectively guarding the array corps of the various divine arrays. They were all fully armed and waiting to set off. There were also more than 260 high-level divine lords scattered throughout Flowing River Pass, hiding in the dark. They were all wearing divine armors and wielding divine weapons, silently waiting for the commander's orders. These high-ranking divine lords, a small portion was Fire Mulberry Empire's imperial guards and royal family retainers. The rest were the various great empires' elite powerhouses. Within close to 5 days, they rushed over from all directions of Fire Mulberry Domain under Domain Lord White Phoenix's orders and gathered at Manchuan Pass. In order to let them arrive in the shortest time possible, the various great empires obeyed the Domain Lord's orders and opened up the transmission divine array for them. Everyone's expressions were very solemn. They also understood in their hearts that the mission they were currently carrying out was definitely very important. Otherwise, Fire Mulberry Emperor and Domain Lord White Phoenix would also not come to Manchuan Pass personally. Manchuan Pass's commander's palace. Divine King White Phoenix sat upright on the throne at the head. She closed her eyes and rested, waiting patiently. Qin Yi and Wu Shui stood on his left and right, giving orders to the scouts and heralds that were entering and exiting the hall. Emperor Huasong stood in the main hall, followed by 4 commanders of the Imperial Guards, waiting for orders at any time. The atmosphere in the hall was oppressive, solemn, and filled with icy cold, killing intent. Not long after, the various scouts and heralds finished their reports. Emperor Huasong bowed to Divine King White Phoenix and reported respectfully, "Field Master, 12 hours ago, we finished setting up the trap. Now, all 12 divine arrays have been activated. The army of 200,000 was in position. More than 260 Sir Gods were also prepared. After 2 rounds of checking, we made sure that there were no flaws or loopholes in our ambush. As long as those alien God Kings show themselves, they will no longer have a chance to escape. They will definitely die." Emperor Huasong's voice was sonorous and powerful. His tone was firm and full of confidence. Divine King White Phoenix on the throne opened her eyes and nodded slightly. She said in a dignified tone, "Pass down the order to all the soldiers to be on alert. Do not relax. I have just cast a spell to predict that the godships of those alien God Kings will pass by Flowing Chuan Pass before sunset. For this operation, I have put in a lot of effort. In order to predict their tracks, I have paid a great price. If you fail to kill those alien God Kings, bring your heads to me." The words "bring your heads to me" made Emperor Huasong's body tremble. His heart was in his throat. He had guessed that this operation would be very important, but he did not expect that the field master would be so determined to kill those alien God Kings. She was determined to succeed. Only then did he realize how serious this matter was. He did not dare to hesitate. He quickly bowed and said sonorously, "Yes, Field Master." After that, he quickly turned and left the main hall to pass down the Field Master's order. However, just as Emperor Huisong walked to the door of the main hall, he saw a herald flying over as fast as lightning. Report. The herald was like a bolt of lightning. He brushed past Emperor Huisong and rushed to the main hall to kneel down. Almost without waiting for White Phoenix to speak, the herald reported with the fastest speed. Reporting to Field Master, a godship was discovered 10,000 miles to the north. Suddenly hearing this news, White Phoenix, who had been gloomy and cold, suddenly had a bright look in her eyes. Her body also emitted a terrifying divine aura. Qingyi and Wu Shui were shocked. They were full of anticipation. Even Emperor Huisong, who was at the door, was stunned for a moment. Then his blood boiled. He looked at Divine King White Phoenix with a burning gaze and exclaimed in admiration, "Domain Lord, you are truly a divine strategist." White Phoenix did not care about this flattery. She raised her hand and ordered, "Pass down the order. Prepare to meet the enemy." As she spoke, she straightened her cloak and stood up from the throne. At this moment, another herald rushed into the main hall as fast as lightning. He knelt down in the main hall and reported, "Report, Field Master, that unfamiliar godship is only 5,000 miles away from Flowing Chuan Pass. It has already entered the ambush range." Although the news this herald reported was even more shocking and exciting, it was expected. However, this was within everyone's expectations, so they didn't feel too excited. White Phoenix looked sharply outside the main hall. Her lips curled into a cold smile. She said in a dignified tone, "Let's go. Follow me to meet them. Let's see what they are capable of." Qingyi, Wu Shui, and Emperor Huisong were full of anticipation. They hurriedly nodded and acknowledged the order. White Phoenix strode across the main hall and walked towards the door. Qingyi, Wu Shui, and Emperor Huisong hurriedly followed. They were already imagining how the god kings of the foreign races would look like. When Divine King White Phoenix reached the entrance, another messenger rushed over as fast as lightning. Before he could report, White Phoenix raised her hand to stop him. She said, "No need to report. The target has been caught. I will go and reel in the net now." That herald was stunned. His expression became a little strange. He wanted to say something, but stopped. Qingyi saw through the clues and asked with a frown, "What are you still standing there for? If there's nothing else, you can leave." The herald then braced himself and explained, "Field Master, I have another matter to report. Just now, Lord Divine General rushed to Flowing Chuan Pass and requested to see you. He knows that you're overseeing this place and want to deal with the foreign race god kings personally. He rushed over at his fastest speed. He wants to follow you into battle no matter what. He requests that you give him a chance to take revenge personally." Heavenly, smelting divine craftsman, White Phoenix looked surprised. She raised her eyebrows and said with a playful smile, "This fellow came at the right time. He wants to take revenge personally? All right, I will give him this chance." Chapter 34:47. Heaven's will Divine King steered the palace and maintained a constant speed as he flew across the sky. The sun was already setting in the west, gradually descending into the horizon. Heaven's will Divine King stared straight ahead as he released his consciousness to check the surrounding situation. Flowing Creek Pass is just ahead. After crossing that pass, I will enter the Fire Mulberry Empire. He muttered to himself as he steered the palace to fly towards Flowing Creek Pass. Although his consciousness detected that there were large numbers of armored sword-wielding soldiers around the pass, scattered in the mountains and forests. But he knew that Flowing Creek Pass had 200,000 guards to begin with. Although there were many guards, they were only celestial god experts. There were not many divine lord experts. As long as no divine king experts appeared, Heaven's will Divine King would not be too concerned. To an expert like him, anyone below Divine King was an ant. Even an army of 200,000 celestial gods could not do anything to him. But as the palace entered Flowing Creek Pass, Heaven's will Divine King gradually sensed that something was amiss. Logically speaking, the guards of Flowing Creek Pass should be stationed within the pass. Only a small portion of the guards would go out to patrol. But the situation before him was different. An army of 200,000 celestial gods came out in full force and spread out around Flowing Creek Pass, forming an encirclement of 10,000 miles. Among the large army, there were over 200 high-ranking divine lords and over 300 middle-ranking and low-ranking divine lords. Those divine lords were divided into small teams and arranged in special positions. It looked like they had formed some kind of array formation. Heaven's divine king immediately frowned and muttered to himself, "Those divine lords and 200,000 guards have formed an encirclement. It seems like they are waiting for rabbits to come to them. That can't be. Fire Mulberry Empire and Sanglon Empire have always been at peace. With White Phoenix divine king suppressing, the various large empires did not dare to start a war. If not to deal with Sanglon Empire, then who is the target of the 200,000 guards? Could it be young Master Tianqing? White Phoenix ordered Flowing Creek Pass to let the 200,000 guards intercept young Master Tianqing. In a blink of an eye, Heaven's divine king analyzed the situation before him and sensed that something was amiss. That's not right. Even a fool knows that with just that army of 200,000 celestial gods, it is impossible to stop a few divine kings. Even if they set up a divine array formation, is useless. Therefore, there's absolutely still a divine king powerhouse holding down the fort inside Boundless Pass. At the thought of this, God King Tian will no longer hesitated as he immediately activated the spatial god array in the palace. Regardless of whether his analysis was right or wrong, he had to teleport the palace 10,000 miles away and immediately cross the Flowing Creek Pass to escape the encirclement of the defending army. Shua, the palace, which looked like a divine warship, immediately lit up with a dazzling white light and released powerful spatial divine power fluctuations. The palace was about to break through space and teleport thousands of miles away. At this critical moment, the dim Manchuan Pass lit up with resplendent multicolored divine light, illuminating the area within a radius of 10,000 miles. Voila! 5-color divine light appeared from all directions, forming a massive halo that sealed off an area with a radius of over 5,000 kilometers. In the blink of an eye, the circle of light extended into a curtain of light that covered the sky, forming a huge divine formation that sealed off the area. The space within a 10,000-mile radius froze. The divine matrix was activated, releasing an invisible pressure that enveloped the palace of Heaven's will. Suddenly, the palace's teleportation was interrupted. The space around the palace was like a frozen block of ice, squeezing it hard. Kacha! Kacha! With a series of shattering sounds, the divine light on the surface of the Palace of Heavens will quickly shattered. But this was only the beginning of the ambush. After the first divine matrix was activated, the surroundings of the Flowing Creek Pass lit up with resplendent divine light again. Shwa! Shwa! One after another, massive light screens formed in the sky, sealing off an area with a radius of 5,000 kilometers. Outside the first sealing divine matrix, one divine matrix after another was activated, completely sealing off the area. No matter how capable God King Tian Will was, he could not break these divine matrices in a short period of time, much less escape from the Flowing Creek Pass. Damn it, we've fallen into an ambush. They actually set up so many divine matrices in the Flowing Creek Pass. God King Tian Will frowned as a cold glint flashed in his eyes. But he did not panic in the face of danger. He controlled the palace to stop in the sky and calmly observed the situation. At the same time, tens of thousands of divine lights lit up in the Flowing Creek Pass as earth-shattering battle cries rang out. Kill! They've been surrounded. Charge! Nearly 100,000 well-equipped defenders, brandishing all sorts of divine weapons, surged out from all directions and charged at the Palace of Heaven's will. Furthermore, outside the commander's palace in the Flowing Creek Pass, Baifeng also led Qin Yi, Wu Shui, and Emperor Huisong across the sky, flying towards the Palace of Heaven's will. Of course, just as the four of them left the commander's palace, the heavenly, smelting divine craftsman flew over. He flew in front of divine king by Feng and bowed, saying in an agitated tone, "Greetings, domain lord." This king was once humiliated by those foreign race divine kings, and I swear to avenge this grudge. This king wants to take revenge with his own hands and kill the enemy with his own hands. Please allow it. Divine king, by Feng glanced at him and nodded slightly. Heavenly smelting divine craftsman is willing to help this king. How can this king not agree? Heavenly smelting divine craftsman was overjoyed as he hurriedly cupped his fists and bowed. Many thanks, domain lord. Following that, he joined the group and followed by Feng divine king to the palace of heaven's will. After a few breaths, the encirclement of close to 100,000 guards closed in, surrounding the palace of heaven's will. Everyone wielded their swords and sabers, aiming at the palace that flickered with divine light. As long as the commander gave the order, they would launch an attack with all their might. And at this time, Divine King Bai Feng and the rest also rushed to the scene. When they were still 100 miles away from the palace, everyone stopped in the sky, watching with cold eyes. Everyone saw with their own eyes that the resplendent divine ship continuously shattered under the combined suppression of the 9 divine arrays. Before long, the divine ship collapsed, turning into a golden palace with a radius of 100,000 feet. Seeing this scene, Divine King Bai Feng and the rest all frowned, revealing puzzled looks. Domain Lord, this divine ship seems to be different from the scene you predicted. Qin Yi could not resist opening his mouth to ask. Wu Shui also nodded and seconded. Domain Lord, in the scene you predicted previously, those few foreign race divine kings were riding on an azure divine ship. But this divine ship in front of us is a palace. Could it be that we stopped the wrong people? Emperor Huisong did not know the truth and did not have the right to speak, so he maintained silence. Heavenly smelting divine craftsman stared at the palace of heaven's will. After carefully observing for a moment, he suddenly said agitatedly, "We didn't stop the wrong people. This king recognizes this palace. This is that young divine craftsman's palace. It's him who provoked this king at Fire Dragon Mountain. That's why this incident happened. Towards heaven's will divine king, he also hated him to the bones. If he could borrow divine king Bai Feng's hands to eliminate heaven's will divine king, he was naturally very happy and looking forward to it. However, divine king Bai Feng frowned and said in a solemn voice, those few foreign race divine kings are this king's primary target." Chapter 34:48. Indeed, divine king White Phoenix made such a big fuss just to intercept and kill Ji Tianqing and company. After all, this was stellar aspect, divine envoy's order, and also represented the will of the Azura God Emperor. As the Fire Mulberry Domain Lord, divine king White Phoenix naturally had to carry it out unconditionally. But divine king White Phoenix was not interested in the matter of divine craftsman Sky Smelting being humiliated by other divine craftsmen, nor did he think of avenging him. His own skills were inferior, and he lost face in front of his disciples and grand disciples. Who could he blame? Seeing divine king White Phoenix's firm attitude, divine craftsman Sky Smelting immediately became anxious. He pointed at Heaven's Will Palace and said in a certain tone, "Your Excellency, Domain Lord, this king saw them at Fire Dragon Mountain and even competed with them, so I understand them better. That young divine craftsman is in cahoots with a few foreign race divine kings. They deliberately schemed against this king and joined hands to put on a two-man show, causing this king to lose face." Hearing divine craftsman Sky Smelting's words, divine king White Phoenix frowned again. He looked at divine craftsman Sky Smelting with a dignified gaze and said in a deep voice, "Don't make irresponsible remarks to this king for the sake of taking revenge. You have to think carefully about the price of using and deceiving this king." No one was stupid. Divine King White Phoenix also would not completely believe divine craftsman Sky Smelting. Divine craftsman Sky Smelting's expression immediately turned ugly and somewhat hesitant. But the words had already been spoken and could not be taken back. If he cowered now, It would prove that he was using divine King White Phoenix to take revenge. Therefore, divine craftsman Sky Smelting weighed the pros and cons before saying firmly, "Your Excellency, Domain Lord, rest assured. Every word this king said is true." Regardless of the consequences, divine craftsman Sky Smelting decided to take a gamble. Divine King White Phoenix gave him a deep look and did not say anything else. He ordered in a deep voice, "Search that palace." Qin Yi and Wu Shui said yes at the same time and drew their divine weapons and flew toward Heavenswell Palace. And at this time, Heavenswell Palace's door opened. Wearing a white cloak, the white-haired Heavenswell Divine King walked out of the palace's door. He thought to himself, "Indeed, as I expected, White Phoenix really brought divine craftsman Sky Smelting and 2 deputies to set up an ambush here, waiting for us to walk into the trap." On the surface, he remained calm and collected. His expression and eyes were cold and indifferent. Standing at the entrance of the palace, he coldly swept his gaze across by Feng, the divine craftsman, Qin Yi, and Wu Shui as his lips curled into a cold smile. If this king didn't guess wrongly, the person in front is the Fire Mulberry Domain's lord, Divine King White Phoenix? Jiang Tianyi stared at Divine King White Phoenix, asking the obvious. Bai Feng looked at him coldly and said in a dignified voice, "That's me. Are you the divine blacksmith who set up an arena at Mount Fire Dragon to recruit disciples?" "That's right." Jiang Tianyi nodded, a mocking sneer on his face as he said, "A straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. This king will get straight to the point." White Phoenix Divine King, making such a big fuss and laying down an inescapable net in Flowing River Pass. Could it be to vent his anger for the heavenly, smelting divine craftsman? He. It was just a spar and competition in the way of refining. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's skills were not as good as others, so he lost to this king. What? The heavenly smelting divine craftsman is a sore loser, and White Phoenix Domain Lord also plans to silence him. Divine King White Phoenix frowned fiercely and shouted angrily, "Don't distort the truth and slander this king. This king is not interested in the exchange and spar between you 2 divine craftsmen. However, you have a close relationship with the fugitives this king wants to capture. This king is under the orders of Lord Divine Envoy, and specially set up a checkpoint here to check every divine ship that passes by. Open the palace now. This king wants to check carefully. Fugitives? Capture under the orders of the Divine Envoy?" Jiang Tianyi was momentarily stunned and frowned in confusion. However, he immediately reacted and sneered disdainfully, "Hey, Divine King White Phoenix, the excuse you came up with is really low-level and boring. If you want to help the heavenly, smelting divine craftsman take revenge, just say it. This king even respects you for being domineering. As a domain lord, don't you even have this bit of responsibility and courage?" Divine King White Phoenix's face turned gloomy and his eyes flickered with a cold light. He asked in a deep voice, "Brat, looks like you don't plan to cooperate and want to go against this king?" He was too lazy to explain to Jiang Tianyi and would not take out Star Aspect Divine Envoy's order to prove that he was really carrying out a mission. After all, he was a domain lord and the other party was a nobody. Ha ha ha! Jiang Tianyi laughed loudly and weighed a crystal in his hand. He sneered and said, "This king wants to use the image recording crystal to record this matter completely. This will also let the other domain lords and the various divine kings see that the Fire Mulberry Domain Lord is using his position to avenge private wrongs." After saying that, he inserted his divine power into the image recording crystal and activated the array formation in the crystal. All the surrounding scenes and sound were clearly recorded in the crystal and were preserved. Jiang Tianyi even said to the image recording crystal, "This king came to the Fire Mulberry Domain and set up an arena at Fire Dragon Mountain to accept the challenge of all the weapon craftsmen and choose disciples from them. The heavenly smelting divine craftsmen's disciples all lost and lost face. Thus, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman personally came to challenge this king, but was also crushed by this king and lost miserably in front of everyone. Who would have thought that in order to help the heavenly smelting divine craftsman, Domain Lord by Phone actually set up a massive ambush at Flowing River Pass and even found a dignified excuse. Jiang Tianyi explained the cause and process of the matter in a concise manner. Looking at his posture, he would definitely release the image recording crystal to the public and let the various domain lords and Divine King see Divine King Bai Feng's ugly actions clearly. Divine King Bai Feng's anger surged as her eyes shot out a cold light. Qin Yi and Wu Shui also revealed anger as they accumulated divine power in their bodies, ready to attack Jiang Tianyi at any time. Only the heavenly smelting divine craftsman was filled with pride and was in a good mood. Previously, he was worried that Divine King Bai Feng would not help him deal with Jiang Tianyi. Who would have thought that Jiang Tianyi was so arrogant and did not know what was good for him, offending Divine King Bai Feng so easily? Thus, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman decided to fan the flames and laughed loudly. Ha ha! Kid, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? You dare to threaten Domain Lord Bai Feng? Image recording crystal? Record it all. It is useless. If you can release it to the world, this king will twist my head off and kick it like a ball. You can forget about walking out of Flowing Creek Pass today. These few words from the heavenly smelting divine craftsman further proved that Divine King Bai Feng was here to kill Jiang Tianyi. Divine King Bai Feng took the blame for nothing and was even more furious in her heart. But she could not fall out with him in public and reprimand the heavenly smelting divine craftsman. Jiang Tianyi shook the image recording crystal in his hand, the cold smile on his face deepening as he said loudly, "Indeed, this king guessed correctly. Domain Lord Bai Feng is making such a big fuss because you want to kill this king. However, Bai Feng, do you know who this king is? For a mere lesser divine craftsman, you want to kill this king to the last man? Have you considered the consequences?" The moment these words came out, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman, Qin Yi and Wu Shui were all stunned. Divine King Bai Feng also narrowed both eyes and asked in a low voice, "Are you threatening this king? Then this king wants to see just what kind of backing you have to actually give you such great confidence." Chapter 3449. Although the heavenly smelting divine craftsman purposely infuriated Jiang Tianyi and forced Jiang Tianyi to become enemies with Bai Feng, causing Bai Feng to be extremely dissatisfied, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman was like a fox assuming the tiger's might. However, there was no turning back. Bai Feng had already brought people to surround the palace of Heaven's will. Naturally, she would not let him off so easily. In addition, Jiang Tianyi's attitude was very arrogant, and he even threatened him in front of everyone. Even more so, he could not shrink back. Otherwise, he would lose all of his dignity as an area master. Jiang Tianyi stared at Bai Feng and said in a solemn tone, "This king's name is Tianyi, surname Jiang." Bai Feng's eyes narrowed when she heard the word Jiang. Her heart skipped a beat, and she had a bad feeling about this. He glared at Jiang Tianyi and asked in a low voice, "What do you mean?" Without waiting for Jiang Tianyi to reply, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman laughed wildly and said, "Ha ha ha, too laughable. Look at you putting on an act. You really think you're something. Jiang Tianyi? What kind of lousy name was that? This prince has never heard of it before. Even if you have some fame in other regions, this is the Fire Mulberry region. White Phoenix region, Lord has the final say. Do you think you can intimidate Domain Lord White Phoenix with just your name? Do you think White Phoenix Domain Lord is a 3-year-old child?" The heavenly smelting divine craftsman pointed at Jiang Tianyi and scolded arrogantly, "Little brat, don't even think about threatening Domain Lord Bai Feng. Even if you were a Domain Lord, in the eyes of the 200,000 soldiers and several hundred divine lords, there was nothing wrong with the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's attitude. As citizens of the Fire Mulberry Domain, they naturally had to protect Domain Lord White Phoenix and fight against Jiang Tianyi together. However, no one would have thought that Bai Feng was already unable to restrain her anger. She wanted nothing more than to tear the divine craftsman's mouth apart. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's intentions were too obvious. He was forcing Bai Feng and Jiang Tianyi to become enemies, not giving them any chance to ease the tension between them. Tianyi, shut up. Bai Feng was at the end of her patience, and she shouted angrily with a dark face. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman smiled awkwardly and nodded in agreement. Jiang Tianyi glanced at the heavenly smelting divine craftsman with a mocking gaze and sneered, "Old thing, you're finished." After saying that, he ignored the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's venomous gaze and continued to speak to Bai Feng. "I come from the heavenly south and live in the divine attraction grotto heaven. I am now the Jiang clan's 7th young master." Jiang Tianyi believed that Bai Feng should have understood by now. This was indeed the case. Bai Feng immediately frowned, and her pupils constricted. Dense shock flashed in her eyes. The Jiang clan of the divine attraction paradise? The others did not understand. Ordinary god kings did not understand. However, Bai Feng knew very well what this meant. My guess is right. It is indeed the Jiang clan. No wonder he could ruthlessly humiliate the heavenly smelting divine craftsman with such an arrogant attitude. The Jiang clan, one of the ancient clans, one of the clans that is most proficient in the art of refining. Their strength is immeasurable. Bai Feng muttered to herself with a rather solemn expression. She was hesitating and weighing the pros and cons in her heart. In fact, he was also a disciple of an ancient clan. He came from the divine phoenix grotto heaven and was a descendant of the phoenix race. It was precisely because of this that he knew better than anyone just how powerful and terrifying the ancient clans were. Even though the present boundless heaven continent was ruled by the Azura god emperor, the emperor lord revered by billions of living beings. However, the foundation and status of the 18 ancient clans were not inferior to the Azura god emperor. Most of the time, the Azura god emperor was also wary of the ancient clans and was not willing to easily interfere in the grudges between the ancient clans. Furthermore, the 18 ancient clans also had a corresponding tacit understanding and agreement between themselves. Ever since the Azura god emperor unified boundless heaven continent, the various ancient clans became even more united and formed an alliance. Only in this way would they not be disintegrated, divided, and ultimately subdued by the Azura god emperor. Bai Feng had some understanding of the Jiang clan, so she stared at Jiang Tianyi and observed carefully. Jiang Tianyi's appearance and bloodline aura showed that he was indeed a disciple of the Jiang clan. Bai Feng had to consider how to deal with this matter. The other party was a disciple of the Jiang clan and the most outstanding young genius. Of course, she could not easily become enemies with him. Otherwise, the Jiang clan and the Phoenix race would become enemies because of this and affect the unity of the ancient clan alliance. If the Phoenix race pursued the matter, he, as the Fire Mulberry region lord, would bear the brunt and definitely be severely punished. However, the current situation was very awkward. Both sides were at daggers drawn. As the Fire Mulberry region lord, he could not take the initiative to back down and admit defeat. Otherwise, not only would it damage the Phoenix race's reputation, but it would also damage the region lord's dignity and make him a laughingstock. Bai Feng was still considering how to resolve the situation in front of her without hurting the harmony and losing face. However, when the heavenly smelting divine craftsman saw that she was hesitating, he had a bad feeling and was filled with anxiety. Damn it, Bai Feng is actually frightened? Could it be that the brat's background is really very strong? This won't do. I cannot let Bai Feng back down. Otherwise, how can I have a chance to take revenge? Furthermore, I have already become enemies with Jiang Tianyi. Even if I don't take revenge on him, he definitely won't let me off. Thinking of this, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman made a decision. He laughed disdainfully and pointed at Jiang Tianyi and mocked. Brat, what's so great about having the surname Jiang? Just in this flowing river pass, I could find a few thousand people with the surname Jiang for you. I don't care what kind of backing or background you have. Today, you must be investigated by White Feng Region Lord. As long as you collude with those fugitives, you should be punished as well. White Feng Region Lord was personally appointed by His Majesty, the God Emperor. No matter how strong your backing is, Can it be stronger than His Majesty the God Emperor? Not only did you disobey the investigation, you even threatened the region lord. Such actions are going against His Majesty the God Emperor's rule. It is equivalent to rebellion. Following the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's voice, it spread throughout the entire flowing river pass. The 200,000 soldiers and hundreds of god monarchs all expressed their agreement. Everyone was agitated and felt a strong sense of pride in their hearts. Even the Fire Mulberry Emperor was incited. Only Qin Yi and Wu Shui realized that something was wrong. They kept staring at Bai Feng's reaction, waiting for his orders. Seeing that the soldiers' fighting spirit had been ignited, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman no longer hesitated and shouted loudly, "Soldiers, protect the Fire Mulberry region. It is time to be loyal to His Majesty, the God Emperor. Break into the bandits' palace and help the region lord and lord messenger search for the fugitives. Kill." Following his order, the 100,000 soldiers surrounding the Palace of Heavens could no longer suppress their fighting spirit and killing intent. They all waved their swords and sabers and attacked. Swish, 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 rumble, rumble. In the next moment, hundreds of thousands of light blades and divine art shadows flooded the Palace of Heavens like a flood. The terrifying divine art torrent fiercely bombarded the Golden Palace, producing a deafening sound. The soldiers' fighting spirit surged as they attacked without caring about their own safety. However, Bai Feng was shocked and angry. He glared at the heavenly smelting divine craftsman and shouted angrily, "Bastard! This king will not forgive you for acting on your own initiative." The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's thoughts had been seen through, so he naturally felt guilty. However, what was done could not be undone. The war had already begun, and he had achieved his goal. Facing Bai Feng's reprimand, he sneered in his heart, but he pretended to be innocent. "Region Lord, I only stood out to say a few words of justice to protect you and His Majesty, the God Emperor's dignity. Don't accuse me wrongly. Look, the soldiers are all filled with righteous indignation. They are willing to risk their lives for you." Chapter 3450. Divine King White Phoenix nearly vomited blood. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's intentions were clear, but he still pretended to be innocent and loyal. If not for everyone present, Divine King White Phoenix really wanted to cripple him. Since the battle had begun, White Phoenix and the Jiang clan had already become enemies. He could only make the best of it. As the ruler of a region, the greatest taboo was to be overcautious and indecisive. However, Divine King White Phoenix was not willing to be used by the heavenly smelting divine craftsman like this and would not charge forward. He pointed at the Palace of Heavens amidst the divine art torrent and ordered the heavenly smelting divine craftsman, "Didn't you want to kill your enemy? Now that he's in front of you, go kill him. If you can't kill him, this king will kill you." The heavenly smelting divine craftsman immediately trembled in fright. He knew that he was too hasty and had already offended Divine King White Phoenix. But he did not expect Divine King White Phoenix to be so angry. This made him have to guess and mutter, "The matter is actually so serious? That Jiang brat's backer is so powerful that even White Phoenix is afraid? If so, then if I kill him, I will definitely suffer the Jiang clan's revenge." At this moment, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman felt a little regretful. After all, he was also afraid that the Jiang clan's power was too great. He could not withstand the Jiang clan's revenge at all, but an arrow on the bow had to be shot. Divine King White Phoenix stared at him and kept urging him. Seeing that he was still hesitating and considering, Divine King White Phoenix actually took out a divine saber, his entire body bursting with fierce, killing intent. Looking at that posture, if he still did not attack Jiang Tianyi, Divine King White Phoenix would start with him. Helpless, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman could only brace himself, take out a divine spear, and attack the Palace of Heaven's will. "Kill!" The heavenly smelting divine craftsman roared. Holding the scarlet divine spear with both hands, he stabbed out 81 times consecutively, attacking the Palace of Heaven's will. At this time, The Palace of Heavens was enduring the furious attacks of 100,000 defenders and was violently shaking. The Palace of Heavens had many defensive arrays, and all of them were activated, forming 4 layers of incomparably thick shields. Hundreds of thousands of divine art attacks, like a storm, struck the 5-colored shields, creating deafening explosions, but ultimately failed to break through the shields. As for the divine palace within the shield, it was completely unscathed. Jiang Tianyi flew out of the divine palace and did not need the protection of the defensive array. His entire body was glowing with dark golden divine light. He wore a magnificent golden divine armor and stood in the dusky sky. No matter how many attacks landed on his body, they couldn't hurt him at all. He held a pitch-black meteoric iron divine bow in his left hand, while he took out talismans one after another in his right hand. These talismans turned into silver arrows and shot towards the crowd around him. Boom! Every single silver arrow that flew out was like a shooting star that fell into the battle formation of the defending army. It erupted with silver divine flames that covered the heavens and the earth, and it erupted with an enormous explosion that shook the heavens and the earth. The power of each arrow was enough to destroy everything within a radius of a few thousand miles. The destructive power was extremely terrifying. The arrows exploded in the crowd, and the silver divine flames instantly engulfed hundreds and thousands of defenders, reaping one life after another. Any defender that was engulfed by the silver divine flames was burned to ashes and dregs. Not even a single bone was left. Even the divine lords in the battle formation would die on the spot after being engulfed by the silver divine flames, let alone the majority of celestial gods. Apart from divine kings, no one could block his divine arrows. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the 81 spear lights shot out by the divine craftsman struck the divine palace of Heaven's Will's barrier with an earth-shattering explosion. The spear lights shattered, but the barrier remained intact. It was simply too difficult for the divine craftsman, a lesser divine king, to break through a mid-king level defensive array with his strength. The divine craftsman was very unconvinced, so he used all his strength to attack the divine palace of Heaven's Will. But the result was the same. The barrier of divine light that seemed to be only 2 feet thick was still intact. Jiang Tianyi had already shot out more than 200 arrows, slaughtering 34,000 defenders. In just a few dozen breaths, a third of the army of 100,000 had been slaughtered. Such ferocious divine might not only intimidated the surviving 60,000 defenders, but it also filled them with fear. Even divine King White Phoenix, Qin Yi, Wu Shui, and the others had grave and sinister expressions. Damn it, we have to hold him back, or else the army of 100,000 won't be enough to kill him. Divine King White Phoenix frowned and gave the order. Qin Yi, Wu Shui, and Emperor Huisong acknowledged the order at the same time. They waved their weapons and attacked Jiang Tianyi. 6 gods domineering blade, red lotus sky opening strike, mountain-shattering divine sword. The 3 used all their strength and used powerful killing moves to attack Jiang Tianyi from different directions. The divine craftsman saw that continuing to attack the divine palace of heavens was futile, so he turned and attacked Jiang Tianyi. Storm wind fire spear. Heavenly smelting divine craftsman roared angrily. He held the divine spear with both hands and stabbed out spear shadows that filled the sky. He released dozens of laws and divine powers, forming wind, fire, and lightning that filled the sky. Jiang Tianyi could ignore the attacks of tens of thousands of soldiers and focus on killing the defenders. However, he couldn't ignore the attacks of 3 divine kings and a peak divine lord. Facing the divine arts of the 4 experts, he flipped the meteoric metal divine bow in his left hand and released pitch-black ripples that expanded like a whirlpool. He threw out a giant palm with his right hand and clashed with the 4 experts. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, a deafening muffled sound burst out and resounded through the sky. The divine spells of the 4 powerhouses were all shattered by the giant golden palm. The destructive shockwaves were absorbed by the mysterious ripples and merged into 4 water tank-sized light balls that flew back at an even faster speed toward the divine craftsman, Qin Yi, and the others. Such a situation caused the 4 experts to be horrified. They didn't expect Jiang Tianyi to react so quickly and have such rich battle experience. He used one move to not only resolve their attacks, but also counterattack. This was truly frightening. The divine craftsman, Qin Yi, and the others all defended as if they were facing a great enemy. All kinds of defensive shields, armors, and defensive secret techniques were used. Bang, 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 bang. Emperor Huasong was the first to be sent flying. Although he had raised his defense to the extreme, he was still a peak divine lord. The difference in strength between him and a middle-level divine king was too great. The power of that colorful ball of light had long since exceeded the limits of what he could endure. When he was hit, he didn't even have the slightest resistance and was sent flying hundreds of miles away, with blood spurting out of his 7 orifices. Not only were his arms broken, but there was also a big hole in his chest. Blood kept coming out of his mouth. Emperor Huasong only felt a lingering fear after suffering such a serious injury. He was glad that he had survived the disaster. It's too scary. Fortunately, I defended with all my strength and survived. Otherwise, I would have been killed instantly. Sogu. Chapter 3451. Emperor Huasong was well aware. With his strength, in front of Jiang Tianyi, he could not even withstand one move. If he braced himself and charged forward to fight, he would only end up turning into ashes. Therefore, he took the opportunity of being heavily injured, his hair disheveled, face covered in blood, and rushed in front of Baifeng. Domain Lord, subordinate is no match for that Jiang clan thief. He is at least a middle-level god king. Emperor Huasong did not tidy up his ragged clothes and hair, nor did he wipe away the blood on his face, looking very miserable and disheveled. Even when he spoke, he was at his last gasp, looking like he would not live for long. Divine King Baifeng glanced at him, waved his hand, and said, "Since you are heavily injured, then withdraw and heal." Emperor Huasong was naturally happy that Domain Lord did not send him to his death, but he was rather smart, bowed and thanked, and said in a firm tone, "Domain Lord, although subordinate is heavily injured, the soldiers are still fighting a bloody battle. How can subordinate cower? Even if subordinate is heavily injured, subordinate also has to contribute to Domain Lord. Subordinate will go to the star-killing array, personally preside over the operation of the grand array, and assist Domain Lord to kill the enemy." Emperor Huasong would do this. Divine King Baifeng was not surprised. After all, Emperor Huasong was promoted by him. He knew him very well. "All right, you go." Divine King Baifeng nodded in agreement. Emperor Huasong acknowledged the order, hurriedly bowed and retreated, flying towards the divine array 4,000 miles away. Until now, he dared to circulate his skill to suppress his injuries, hurriedly consumed a divine pill to heal. On the other side, divine craftsman Sky Smelting, Qin Yi, and Wu Shui had been trying their best to besiege Jiang Tianyi, but ultimately had no effect. Although Qin Yi and Wu Shui were middle-level god kings, they were only 4th-level god king realm. Not to mention divine craftsman Sky Smelting, he was just a 3rd-degree realm low-level god king. And Jiang Tianyi was the leader among middle-level god kings. His strength reached 6th-level god king realm. Divine craftsman Sky Smelting was obsessed with the path of refining. His combat power was not outstanding. No matter how he attacked with all his strength, it was no different from scratching an itch to Jiang Tianyi. Qin Yi and Wu Shui's attacks could barely threaten Jiang Tianyi, but Jiang Tianyi could resolve their besiegement with a little trick. The two sides fought for 100 breaths of time, but Jiang Tianyi was still unharmed. On the other hand, divine craftsman Tianyi, Qin Yi, and Wu Shui were all heavily injured. This was especially true for the divine blacksmith, who had been heavily taken care of by Jiang Tianyi. He had long been beaten beyond recognition and was covered in blood. If not for divine King White Phoenix watching from afar, he would have had thoughts of retreating long ago and wanted to withdraw from the battle circle. He felt that if this continued, he would soon be killed by Jiang Tianyi. There was nothing he could do. Jiang Tianyi was targeting him too much. During the battle, there were clearly better opportunities to heavily injure Qin Yi or Wu Shui, but Jiang Tianyi wanted to deal with him. On the surface, it looked like the three of them were attacking Jiang Tianyi. Everyone was putting in the same amount of effort and danger. But in reality, Qin Yi and Wu Shui were relatively safe. He was in the most dangerous situation. The two sides fought for a while, and the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's injuries became even more miserable. Not only was his left arm chopped off, but there were also dozens of bloody holes in his chest and back. His internal organs and blood were flowing out together. Not only did he look miserable, but his strength had also greatly decreased, and he only had about 50% of his combat strength left. Under such circumstances, he could not hold on anymore. But he did not dare to turn around and flee. He could only seek help from Divine King White Phoenix, not far away. Domain Lord, Your Excellency, save me. This guy's strength is too strong. If you still don't make a move, not only will I be killed by him, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers will also die. Your Excellency, it's nothing if I die in battle for you. But those hundreds of thousands of soldiers are all your most loyal subjects. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's voice was very loud, spreading throughout the entire flowing Chuan Pass. Not only did the remaining 40,000 defending troops on the battlefield hear it, the 100,000 defending troops around flowing Chuan Pass also heard it clearly. Everyone's gazes gathered on Divine King White Phoenix. That's right, Jiang Tianyi's strength was terrifyingly powerful. An entire 100,000 defending troops besieged him, but in such a short time, more than half of them were slaughtered by him. Heavenly Smelting, Qin Yi, and Wu Shui besieged him with all their might, but could not do anything to him. Instead, they were beaten until their injuries were miserable. The defending troops' morale was low, everyone on tenterhooks. If Divine King White Phoenix still did not make a move, the hundreds of thousands of defending troops would probably be discouraged. Now, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman was shouting at the top of his lungs again. He even said that it was fine if he died, but did not want the hundreds of thousands of soldiers to die. This was equivalent to threatening White Phoenix in front of everyone. If he still did not make a move, he was ignoring the hundreds of thousands of soldiers. You damn dog. Too despicable. White Phoenix was so angry that even his face turned green, roaring furiously in his heart. He really wanted to kill the heavenly smelting divine craftsman. But with hundreds of thousands of soldiers watching, not only could he not do so, but he also could not show his anger. Soldiers, no matter how strong the enemy is, with this king here, he will definitely die. Divine King White Phoenix shouted, his left hand forming a divine seal, his right hand waving a divine saber, attacking Jiang Tianyi. Thief, take this king's saber. Divine King White Phoenix finally made a move. Heavenly Phoenix Moon slashing saber. At this moment, divine flames surged from his body, forming the image of a 1,000 feet tall fire phoenix behind him. The scarlet divine saber in his hand also slashed out a divine saber beam that was hundreds of thousands of feet long. The saber beam was like blood, tearing through the night, carrying close to 200 types of laws and divine power as it slashed toward Jiang Tianyi with a momentum that could destroy everything. Before the saber beam arrived, the world changed color. The already dark sky turned completely pitch black. Only the 5-color divine light and blood-color divine flames were left in the world. An incomparable pressure instantly enveloped Jiang Tianyi, causing his back to turn cold and his heart to fill with dread. In comparison, the combined forces of heavenly smelting, Qin Yi, Wu Shui, and the 100,000 defending troops were inferior to Divine King White Phoenix alone. The pressure he felt was even greater. He did not doubt that if Divine King White Phoenix's saber strike hit him, he would be killed instantly. Even if he was not killed on the spot, he would be severely injured and his strength would plummet. At the critical moment, he did not hesitate to give up chasing the heavenly, smelting divine craftsman and wanted to retreat. However, the entire brimming Chuan Pass was sealed by several divine arrays. The space within 5,000 miles was sealed, making it impossible for him to teleport. His flying speed was also several times lower than usual. There was no way to dodge Divine King White Phoenix's saber strike. Helpless, Jiang Tianyi could only use all his strength to defend with all his might. Not only did he form a divine light shield, the divine armor he wore also activated an array. At the same time, he held the heavens will divine bow and shot 6 arrows at Divine King White Phoenix. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The 6 arrows tore through the night sky like meteors, instantly striking the saber beam with deafening booms. However, all the arrows collapsed, but the saber beam was undamaged. Its speed and power were only reduced by 30%. The next instant, the saber beam drowned Jiang Tianyi's figure and struck him. Chapter 3452. Bam! Amidst a deafening explosion, Jiang Tianyi was sent flying backwards. The multicolored divine light shield collapsed, splashing out fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the sun. The golden divine armor he was wearing had deep dents on his shoulders and chest. He was still flying in the night sky, and his face was pale. Blood was flowing out of his nose and mouth. Even though he was at the 6th level of the Divine King realm, he could easily kill Tianyi, Qin Yi, and Wu Shui. However, there was still a big gap between him and his 7th level Divine King. Divine King White Phoenix injured him with her first move. Even though it was only a light injury, he was sent flying dozens of miles away. He looked quite miserable. The hundreds of thousands of soldiers who were originally low in morale cheered excitedly. Their morale was back to its peak. Not only the tens of thousands of soldiers who were fighting, even 100,000 soldiers who were guarding the divine array around Chuan Pass were excited. Taking this opportunity, the Emperor of Fire Mulberry Tree hurriedly led the divine monarchs and shouted in admiration, "The domain lord is mighty." The Emperor of Fire Mulberry Tree led the cheers, and the tens of thousands of soldiers echoed. Soon, hundreds of thousands of people shouted in unison. A deafening sound wave spread throughout a radius of several tens of thousands of miles, shaking until the entire Flowing Creek Pass started trembling. At this moment, Divine King White Phoenix's majesty was undeniable. Qin Yi and Wu Shui did not dare to delay and continued to attack Jiang Tianyi. Tianyi Divine Craftsman took this opportunity to retreat 1,000 miles away. He hurriedly took a divine pill and healed himself. Divine King White Phoenix was not in a hurry to kill Jiang Tianyi. She glanced at Tianyi Divine Craftsman coldly, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. She had decided that after she finished off Jiang Tianyi tonight, she would not let Tianyi Divine Craftsman off. This old thing has been domineering in the Fire Mulberry Tree region for nearly 10,000 years. How dare you play tricks in front of me? If I don't teach you an unforgettable lesson, how can you control the billions of people in the future? At this moment, Jiang Tianyi resisted the attacks of the 40,000 soldiers and 2 divine kings while he shouted angrily at Divine King White Phoenix. White Phoenix, do you really want to take revenge for the heavenly smelting divine craftsman and kill me? Are you sure you want to be enemies with the Jiang clan? Jiang Tianyi's expression and eyes were as dark as ice and sharp. A long time ago, he had even promised Ji Tianxing that with the Jiang clan's power and foundation, Baifeng would definitely give him face. He did not expect that after he revealed his identity, the White Phoenix Divine King still made a move to attack. Baifeng did not give him any face at all, nor did she care about the Jiang clan's deterrence. This caused him to be abnormally ashamed and angry, and his heart was truly filled with killing intent. However, Divine King White Phoenix stared at him expressionlessly and said in a low voice, "Jiang Tianyi, no matter who you are, I am only following orders." So what if he offended the Jiang clan? This king is working for the Celestial Aspect Ambassador, serving His Majesty, the God Emperor. If you had allowed me to search the palace, how could things have developed to this point? Divine King White Phoenix's original intention was not to become enemies with the Jiang clan. But now that things had come to this, it was too late to say anything. In front of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, he could not shrink back either. Otherwise, it would prove that he was afraid of the Jiang clan, and his dignity as a region lord would be gone. Jiang Tianyi nodded and said with a cold smile, "Very good. Bai Feng, since you are so vicious and vicious, then there's nothing to say. If I die in battle here tonight, you and the Phoenix clan will not be able to escape responsibility. Just wait to suffer the Jiang clan's wrath." As he said, he took out a transmission jade slip from his interspatial ring and entered a message inside. He wanted to report tonight's matter to the Jiang clan. This way, even if he was unfortunately killed by the White Phoenix Divine King, the Jiang clan would also help him take revenge. Divine King White Phoenix was a wily old fox. The moment he saw Jiang Tianyi take out the transmission jade slip, he understood what he wanted to do. Immediately, Divine King White Phoenix's pupils constricted, his eyes flashing with cold, killing intent. "Jiang Tianyi, if you cooperate with me, perhaps I won't be so ruthless. But if you do this, then don't blame me for cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots, eliminating future troubles forever." As he said that, Divine King White Phoenix waved his divine saber again and attacked Jiang Tianyi fiercely. He wanted to stop Jiang Tianyi from sending the message to prevent the Jiang clan from knowing about this. As long as the news did not spread, he could kill Jiang Tianyi quickly and hide it from everyone. 7 Heart Annihilation / Bai Feng held the divine saber with both hands as divine flames surged from his body. The Annihilation Divine Eye on his forehead also released dark red blood flames. Swoosh! The divine saber released a 10,000-meter saber light mixed with the mysterious Annihilation blood flames. It carried unparalleled power and a mysterious power that could destroy one's mind as it slashed toward Jiang Tianyi. At this moment, the saber light died flowing creek past the color of blood. The space within 10,000 miles also rippled violently, as if it could not withstand the might of the divine saber and was about to collapse. Jiang Tianyi was under great pressure and could not move an inch. His body also became crooked. "Bai Feng, you old bastard, the Jiang clan and you are irreconcilable." Jiang Tianyi had a bad premonition and even felt the aura of death descend. He roared furiously. However, he would not sit and wait for death. He ignored the tens of thousands of soldiers and the 2 divine kings and used all his strength to block Bai Feng. Kaboom! The next moment, the saber light slashed down and shattered Jiang Tianyi's divine light shield. Then, the Tianyi divine bow in his hands was also sent flying by the saber light. He was about to be struck by the saber light again and be sent flying with heavy injuries. At this critical moment, a blinding white light suddenly appeared in front of Jiang Tianyi. It was a white light wall that was tens of thousands of feet tall and tens of thousands of feet wide. It was thick and sturdy. Kaboom! The saber light slashed the white light wall and exploded with an earth-shattering sound. Instantly, the saber light and the white light wall collapsed at the same time, exploding into billions of divine light shards that scattered in the night sky. Divine King White Phoenix's ultimate killing move was actually blocked. Jiang Tianyi was not injured. He was only pushed back tens of thousands of feet by the violent shockwave. This scene stunned him. Divine King Bai Feng, Qin Yi, Wu Shui, and the tens of thousands of soldiers also revealed stunned looks. No one could have thought that there was actually someone even stronger who made a move at the critical moment and saved Jiang Tianyi. Everyone turned their heads to look at Tianyi Palace. Their gazes gathered on a white figure at the palace's entrance. Jiang Tianyi came back to his senses and also turned his head to look at the divine palace's entrance. When he saw that white-robed figure clearly, he immediately frowned, his expression becoming very complicated. "Young Master Tianxing? Indeed, it was him who saved me. But why can he appear at this time? Bai Feng made such a big fuss in order to intercept and kill him. Doesn't his appearance confirm that Bai Feng's guess was correct?" Although Jiang Tianyi was saved by Ji Tianxing, he felt grateful and rejoiced in his heart. But he was even more worried in his heart. Tonight was definitely a situation where one party would not rest until one party died. Chapter 3453. Swish! Jiang Tianyi could not be bothered to heal his injuries. He quickly flew out of the palace and arrived in front of Ji Tianxing. Young Master Tianxing, why did you come out? They set up an ambush here to deal with you. Jiang Tianyi frowned and looked at Ji Tianxing, his voice filled with worry and urgency. Seeing his reaction, Ji Tianxing smiled and asked, "Don't you find it strange? Don't you want to know what grudges I have with Celestial Aspect Ambassador and Divine King White Phoenix?" Sigh. Jiang Tianyi could not help but sigh, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What's the point of asking this now? Even if you don't have grudges with Celestial Aspect Ambassador, White Phoenix does not intend to let me go. Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a chuckle, "Kid, you're quite similar to your second uncle. However, you're already heavily injured, and you still want to fight alone. Isn't that a bit too much? If I don't help, you'll be heavily injured by White Phoenix again." Jiang Tianyi was temporarily speechless. After thinking about it seriously, it seemed like this was indeed the best solution. If Ji Tianxing did not appear, he would not be able to stop White Phoenix alone, and he would not be able to escape Flowing River Pass. All right, then let's fight side by side and kill White Phoenix and this group of bastards. Jiang Tianyi quickly adjusted his mentality and regrouped. He extended his right hand and called back the divine bow that had fallen a few hundred miles away. Swish! The meteoric metal divine bow flew back to him. He grabbed it with his left hand and took out 4 talismans from his interspatial ring with his right hand, holding them between his fingers. As he circulated his divine power, the 4 talismans lit up with divine flames and turned into dazzling arrows. The bowstring was pulled to a full moon, and the 4 arrows were ready to shoot, rippling with a terrifying power that could destroy everything. Ji Tianxing also took out the Sword of Burial of Heaven and charged toward Divine King White Phoenix with soaring battle intent. "Tianyi, leave White Phoenix to me. I'll leave the rest to you." As his voice fell, he had already turned into a dazzling meteor and attacked Divine King White Phoenix. Us! Jiang Tianyi was stunned. He looked left and right, but did not see any other helpers. At this moment, 4 figures walked out of the palace gate behind him. "Heavens will God King, we are here to help you." Jiang Tianyi turned his head and saw that the 4 figures were 2 men and 2 women. He had seen 2 of the men on Mount Fire Dragon before. They were Chao Qingyu and Yank. As for the 2 ladies, one of them was wearing a long green dress. She was pretty and graceful, and she was a first-level divine king. She was walking side by side with Chao Qingyu. It was Lana. On the other hand, there was a human woman wearing a silver nebula dress. She was unparalleled in her generation. Although she only had the strength of a 9th-level divine lord, she possessed a sacred and dignified aura. Her clear eyes were filled with calmness and wisdom. She held a divine sword in each hand, 1 gold and 1 silver. They were as dazzling as the sun and the moon, and they emitted the energy fluctuations of a king-grade, mid-grade divine artifact. Moreover, Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan, who seemed to treat her with respect. Jiang Tianyi knew at a glance that this devastatingly beautiful human woman was most likely Master Grandpa's Tao companion. He had such a guess in his heart, but he did not ask, nor did he expose it. He nodded at the 4 of them and revealed a friendly smile. He said, "Many thanks, everyone. Then let's fight side by side and kill our way out of Flowing River Pass." With that said, he held his bow and aimed at the tens of thousands of defenders 1,000 miles away. He instantly shot out 4 arrows. Whoosh! The 4 arrows tore through the night sky like meteors, instantly crossing 1,000 miles and descending on the heads of the tens of thousands of defenders. The arrows suddenly dispersed, blasting into the crowd. Boom! 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 Following 4 deafening booms, the defenders' battle formation erupted with starlight, blotting out the sky and blotting out the sun. At least 2,000 defenders were blown to smithereens on the spot, turning to dust. Jiang Tianyi did not waste time to see the result. The moment the 4 arrows were shot out, he took out 4 talismans and turned them into surveillance, shooting them at the defenders' battle formation. 2,000 miles away, Ji Tianxing and Divine King White Phoenix had already begun fighting. Divine King White Phoenix was extremely powerful, having the power to destroy heaven and earth with every move. She had also grasped hundreds of divine Tao laws and could be said to be ferocious and unpredictable. However, Ji Tianxing was fearless. He transformed into a 300-meter-tall, golden-armored giant, wielding the burial of heaven and attacking wildly, clashing head-on with Divine King White Phoenix. He used hundreds of sword Tao techniques and various ultimate mystiques from time to time, but he was actually evenly matched with Divine King White Phoenix. In a short time, it was difficult to determine the victor between the two. They could only tangle. Of course, the shockwaves from their battle spread in all directions, enveloping the entire flowing river pass. The 40,000 defenders were affected, their numbers dropping sharply. In less than 30 seconds, more than 10,000 were killed. Coupled with Jiang Tianyi's attacks from afar, nearly 10,000 were killed in 30 seconds. More than half of the defenders were killed, and the remaining 20,000 threw away their armor and fled to the edge of the battlefield in a sorry state. At this moment, Chao Qingyu and Yang targeted Qin Yi, Wu Shui, and the sky-smelting divine blacksmith. The 5 of them began an intense battle. Lan Er and Yun Yao, on the other hand, held their divine weapons and chased after the defenders. How could the 20,000 defenders, who had lost their will to fight, withstand their slaughter? In less than a quarter of an hour, the 20,000 survivors were slaughtered by the 2 of them. The inside of Flowing Creek Pass became empty. High in the sky, Ji Tianxing and Divine King White Phoenix fought fiercely. Their figures flickered and teleported, releasing destructive divine arts. Shockwaves spread out like ripples, constantly crashing into Flowing River Pass. The pass, which had a radius of 5,000 miles, was quickly reduced to ruins. Although it was almost impossible for Ji Tianxing to defeat White Phoenix, he could temporarily stall White Phoenix so that she couldn't attack Jiang Tianyi and the others. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, and Yang teamed up to deal with Qin Yi, Wu Shui, and the sky-smelting divine blacksmith. The sky-smelting divine blacksmith was already severely injured, and he was attacked by Jiang Tianyi. He didn't even last 15 minutes before he was killed by Jiang Tianyi's divine bow. Not only was his divine body reduced to ashes, but his divine spark was also shattered. Qin Yi and Wu Shui were also in a miserable state. Their injuries kept worsening, and they were covered in blood. 15 minutes later, both of them were severely injured and shot by Jiang Tianyi a few more times. Their divine bodies were destroyed on the spot. The couple only had their divine sparks left. They retreated in panic and fled to the edge of the battlefield. Jiang Tianyi locked onto their divine sparks and kept shooting arrows, chasing after them in Flowing River Pass. At this time, Chao Qingyu and Yang went to help Lan Er and Yun Yao deal with the 100,000 defenders around Flowing River Pass. They were scattered, and there were a few hundred divine lords in the crowd, so it was difficult to deal with them. But Yang kept an eye on the Emperor of Huasong Country and charged forward recklessly. He was unstoppable. The Emperor of Huasong Country was already severely injured and couldn't resist at all. He could only dodge and escape. More than 100 imperial guards and divine lords of the Huasong Country surrounded him to protect him. That was exactly what Yang wanted. Sword breaks, 9 heaven sword breaks, 9 heavens. Chapter 3454. Yank was like a ferocious prehistoric beast. He was also like a killing machine that could destroy the heavens and earth. He caused a bloody storm in the battle formation. The 100-odd godly lords that were protecting Emperor Huasong were quickly killed by him. Even Emperor Huasong did not last long. He was killed by his fists and turned into ashes. Although Emperor Huasong was dead, the battle formation of the 100,000-strong army was not greatly affected. They were still guarding the bases of the various divine arrays and operating them with all their might to suppress Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Yank, and the others. As the six god formations revolved at high speed, the terrifying god power sealed the flowing river pass and severely weakened Ji Tianxing and the others' combat power. Everyone's speed slowed down significantly. They could not circulate their divine power smoothly, and their movements were extremely inconvenient. Their combat strength was constantly decreasing. Originally, Ji Tianxing could still fight by phone to a draw, but now he was gradually at a disadvantage and was in a passive situation. Soon, he was injured by phone. After all, Ji Tianxing was only at the second level of the Divine King realm. He was 5 levels lower than Divine King by phone. It was only temporary that he could fight by phone to a draw. It was all because of his rich combat experience and various divine powers. Now, the 6 divine arrays were operating at full power and were suppressing him. They had weakened his combat strength by at least 20 to 30%. Under such circumstances, he was no match for by phone. Not only was he forced to retreat, but he was also exhausted from defending. His injuries were also worsening. Seeing that he was in a passive situation, he was in a sorry state. Chao Qingyu, Yun Yao, Yank, and the others all looked worried. Especially Yun Yao. She subconsciously wanted to help Ji Tianxing. However, Lan'er hurriedly pulled her back. Chao Qingyu and Yank also persuaded her. Miss Yun, the battle between young Master Tianxing and Divine King by phone is not something we can interfere with. If we forcefully help, not only will we not be able to help him, we will also be in danger and distract him. Miss Yin, don't worry. Young Master Tianxing will not be defeated so quickly. He should be able to hold on for a long time. Young Master already had a plan. He would hold back Divine King White Phoenix while we deal with the guards and divine arrays as soon as possible. Only in this way can we kill our way out of Flowing River Pass as quickly as possible and escape from danger. If we go to help the Lord, even if we can gain the upper hand, we will still waste time. The longer we wait, the more dangerous our situation will be. Who knows if that old fellow White Phoenix found other divine kings to help or not. After listening to the three's persuasion, Yun Yao suppressed her worries and waved the sun and moon swords with all her might. She continued to slaughter the defenders and destroy the base of the divine array. Not long after, Jiang Tianyi flew back. Qin Yi and Wu Shui's godheads had already been killed by his divine bow. 2 mid-level god kings had perished, leaving behind only 30-odd shards of godhead. Jiang Tianyi looked at Ji Tianxing, who was in danger, and then looked at the 90,000 soldiers and the 200 high-level divine lords maintaining the divine formation. After a moment of consideration, he made up his mind. Kill those high divine lords first and destroy the sealing divine formation. Only in this way can we lessen the pressure on young Master Tianxing and reduce it so that he can last longer. With that, he drew his bow and shot out a series of meteor arrows, attacking the high divine lords in all directions. His archery skills were extremely wondrous. None of his arrows missed within 10,000 miles. He was truly accurate. Against those high divine lords, his archery skills were unleashed to the extreme. Its power was terrifying. Boom, boom, boom. As the arrows flew out like a string of pearls, the defenders bloomed with starlight. Divine flames soared into the sky and exploded with loud booms that shook the heavens. Every explosion of divine flames that soared into the sky represented the death of a few high-level divine lords. Dozens to hundreds of defenders were also affected and turned to ashes. Jiang Tianyi's archery skills were fast, vicious, and accurate. He specialized in killing the high divine lords maintaining the divine array. In less than 100 breaths of time, more than 60 high-level divine lords have been blasted into smithereens, along with more than 20,000 guards. Such a terrifying battle record filled the hearts of the other divine emperors and the defenders with fear. Many people lost their will to fight and were thinking of retreating. If they continued to defend their posts and maintain the divine array, they would be living targets that would be killed by Jiang Tianyi one by one. But if they retreated and abandoned the divine array, the power of the 6 divine arrays would be greatly reduced. By then, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and the others would be even stronger, and White Phoenix Realm Lord would be in danger. So, the tens of thousands of defenders and more than 100 High Divine Lords were stuck in a dilemma. This gave Jiang Tianyi, Yank, Chao Qingyu, and the others an opportunity. The pressure on them was greatly reduced, and they killed the defenders even more fiercely. Even though Yun Yao was the weakest, her fighting power was extremely strong. She was enveloped in dim moonlight, like a goddess descending from the heavens. Her aura was extremely sacred and cold. She swung the sun-moon swords with both hands, as if she was holding the sun in her left hand and the moon in her right hand. The divine light of the sun-moon covered the sky. Swish, 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 swish. Thousands of sword auras of the sun-moon swords were 1,000 feet long, and they landed lightly in the crowd. Following a series of loud, rumbling noises, batch after batch of defenders were killed. Many defenders and high divine lords fought back with all their might and used all kinds of divine powers and techniques to drown her. But she swung her swords and formed a gold and silver net to protect herself. No matter how the defenders and high divine lords attacked, they couldn't hurt her at all. At first, Chao Qingyu, Yank, and Lana were still paying attention to her, worried that her life was in danger and they were ready to save her at any time. But when they saw that she was so powerful and her fighting power was as strong as Lana's, they were relieved. Unknowingly, another 15 minutes had passed. More than half of the 100,000 defenders supporting the divine arrays were killed. Only 40,000 people were left. 70% of the hundreds of divine lords were also killed. Only 70 high divine lords were still stubbornly holding on. Of the 6 divine formations operating at full power, 3 had already been affected. Without the support of a large number of defenders, these 3 divine arrays were operating on their own, and their power was greatly reduced. As a result, the pressure on Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Yin Yao, and the others was reduced. It looked like the 40,000 defenders wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer and would be wiped out soon. Even though Bai Feng had the upper hand and suppressed Ji Tianxing, beating Ji Tianxing until he was covered in wounds, she was extremely anxious. Damn it! How could the strength of these few foreign race divine kings be so formidable? This can't continue. When they kill all the defenders and then join forces to attack me, I'll be in danger. Bai Feng had a premonition of danger, and she was also very angry. These foreign race godly kings actually have close ties with the Jiang clan. Not only did I offend the Jiang clan, but I also can't kill them. I've disappointed divine ambassador Xingxiang. My forces have suffered heavy losses in this battle. Not only were 3 divine kings killed, but I also lost hundreds of elite experts and 200,000 elite soldiers. What a complete defeat. Sogu. Chapter 3455. In reality, Divine King White Phoenix had already lost. His 2 deputies, Qin Yi and Wu Shui, had both perished. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman was killed. Fire Mulberry Emperor was also dead. Over 200 high-level divine lords, over 300 ordinary divine lords, as well as hundreds of thousands of elite soldiers, all sacrificed. Even if he could capture Ji Tianxing and the rest, this price was also too tragic. In the following few hundred years, it would be difficult for Fire Mulberry region to recover its vitality. Furthermore, Divine King White Phoenix had offended the Jiang clan and would definitely suffer the Jiang clan's revenge. Furthermore, Divine King White Phoenix did not have the confidence or hope to capture Ji Tianxing and the rest. Not only could he not capture them, his life would also be in danger. If he still did not change his strategy, he would get closer and closer to death. Ha ha ha! This king is the dignified Fire Mulberry region lord, a high-level divine king, a descendant of the Phoenix clan's bloodline. How could I fall to such a state? For a full 3,000 years, this is the first time this king feels the danger of death. White Phoenix laughed bitterly and coldly in his heart. His eyes were as cold as ice as he stared at Ji Tianxing, firmly memorizing his appearance, as well as divine soul aura. Boy, who exactly are you? How are you related to the Jiang clan? White Phoenix suppressed Ji Tianxing and chased after him in the night sky as he asked solemnly. Ji Tianxing responded calmly from beginning to end, resolving his attacks again and again. He said with a cold smile, "You want to know the answer? Then surrender without a fight. This king will naturally tell you. Dream on." Divine King White Phoenix frowned coldly and mocked contemptuously. "You are not worthy to be this king's opponent. You've already been severely injured by this king. What right do you have to make this king admit defeat and surrender? The one who should surrender is you. If you don't want to die under this king's blade, surrender obediently." Ji Tianxing continued to deal with him and said with a mocking sneer, "Stop putting on airs with this king. Who should surrender? You and I both know in our hearts. After my companions kill all the guards and shut down the 6 divine formations, it will be your time of death. White Phoenix, on account of your cultivation not being easy, this king will give you a chance to live. It's not too late to surrender now." Towards a high-level divine king, like Bai Feng, Ji Tianxing was still somewhat moved. If he could subdue him and turn him into a puppet or bodyguard like Yank, his power would double. Furthermore, Bai Feng was backed by the Phoenix clan. Ji Tianxing was confident that he could infiltrate the Phoenix clan through Bai Feng in the future and take over the Phoenix clan. Now that he was already a divine king, he began to make preparations for his revenge. In the entire divine realm, the 5 overlords were all his mortal enemies. How could he complete his revenge alone? Therefore, he had been cultivating his forces since a long time ago to prepare for the future. From the looks of it, the ancient clans of the various grotto heavens were undoubtedly the best choice. It was also because of this that he agreed to accompany Jiang Tianyi to the Jiang clan as a guest. "Brat, you're too naive. Do you think that a high god king is so easy to deal with? It's just that I haven't been serious all this time." Bai Feng stared at Ji Tianxing, his eyes cold as he said in a solemn tone, "It's still not clear who will emerge victorious." When his voice fell, Bai Feng's body lit up with white light, and he disappeared in a flash. He had finally made up his mind to change his strategy. If he continued to tangle with Ji Tianxing, he would only suffer a crushing defeat. Moreover, he did not have much hope of killing Ji Tianxing. Since that was the case, he might as well settle for the next best thing. He did not have extravagant hopes of killing Ji Tianxing. As long as he trapped Ji Tianxing and the rest in Flowing Creek Pass, Bai Feng would have completed his mission. If he could delay for half a month, he would be able to wait for at least 2 divine envoys, several region lords, and more than 10 God King experts. In that case, Bai Feng would not have to risk his life and would still be able to make a great contribution. This was considered the safest method. Therefore, Bai Feng retreated outside the divine formation and stood in the sky above Flowing Creek Pass, looking down at Ji Tianxing, who was inside the divine formation. Ji Tianxing frowned and raised his head to look at Bai Feng in the night sky. Although the two of them were only 100,000 feet apart, there were 6 divine formations between the two of them. Although the divine formation's power was greatly reduced, they still remained intact and had not been broken. Bai Feng's eyes were focused on the 6 layers of a ray formation light barrier. His hands formed a divine seal, constantly striking out dazzling divine patterns to control the divine formations. Swoosh! Swoosh! Very quickly, the 4 divine formations that were not controlled by anyone shone with dazzling divine light once more, erupting with powerful divine power fluctuations. Under Bai Feng's control, the 4 divine formations were operating at full power, releasing invisible nomological power that fiercely suppressed Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and the rest. The situation inside Flowing Creek Pass instantly changed. Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Yin Yao, and the rest were all suppressed by the 6 divine formations, their combat strength weakened by 20% to 40%. However, no one could stop their attack. The 40,000 garrison troops and 70-odd high-ranking divine lords who were lucky enough to survive originally still wanted to put up a stubborn resistance. But when they saw that Fire Mulberry Emperor was dead, Qin Yi and Wu Shui were killed, and the heavenly smelting divine craftsman was also dead. Now, Even Domain Lord Bifong had escaped from the divine formations and stood in the sky above Flowing Creek Pass. They were truly a group of dragons without a leader and were in complete despair. It's over. We've lost completely. 3 divine king powerhouses have been killed, and even His Excellency the Domain Lord has escaped from Flowing Creek Pass. We're dead for sure. We're all selling our lives for His Excellency the Domain Lord. How can He abandon us and flee alone? Ha ha! We were too stupid to be treated as cannon fodder by His Excellency the Domain Lord. All along, we thought that His Excellency the Domain Lord was unparalleled in the world, valiant and invincible. I didn't expect that when he really encountered a few foreign race divine kings, His Excellency the Domain Lord fled in defeat. What a joke! Countless soldiers and dozens of high-ranking divine lords all had heavy hearts and despair, their expressions sorrowful. Everyone understood that they had been abandoned by Bifong. Immediately, most of the soldiers and high-ranking divine lords lost their fighting spirit and no longer controlled the divine formations. Deafening discussions erupted in the crowd, roars of despair, unwillingness, and grief and indignation. Many high-ranking divine lords brought large batches of defending troops and retreated, fleeing out of Flowing Creek Pass. But they were blocked by layer after layer of divine formations, unable to escape at all. Finally, someone erupted in despair. A high-ranking divine lord looked up at the night sky and roared angrily at Bifong. Domain Lord Bifong, all of us respect and worship you. That's why we bathed in blood and fought bravely for you, advancing dauntlessly wave after wave. But this is how you treat us? Aren't you afraid that this matter will spread out and make the Fire Mulberry region's billions of citizens bitterly disappointed? Furthermore, you abandoned us and allowed us to be slaughtered to the last. What benefits does it have to you? After we're all dead, what's the use of you being the only one left? Can you kill these few foreign race divine kings? I'm afraid that you'd still have to flee in defeat, right? Since that's the case, why can't you have some backbone and fight a bloody battle with everyone to the end? This high-ranking divine lord shouted out the inner voice of several tens of thousands of defending troops. Countless people chimed in loudly, questioning why Divine King White Phoenix did this. Immediately, the entire Flowing Creek Pass seethed with excitement. Chapter 3456. The crowd was agitated. The 40,000 defending troops and dozens of high-ranking divine lords were not in the mood to fight. They joined forces to denounce Domain Lord White Phoenix. Speaking of which, it was also strange. If the leader of the soldiers was Emperor Huasong, perhaps they would not be so indignant. At least, Emperor Huasong would say some high-sounding words to boost morale and encourage the soldiers to continue holding on. But Domain Lord White Phoenix was good. He was always high and mighty, sacred and dignified. He did not even make a sound when he fled, afraid that the soldiers would find out and lose face as a domain lord. Most importantly, he was too high and mighty. It was basically the first time the 40,000 soldiers present saw him. Their reverence for him was very vague. Instead, their reverence for Emperor Huisong was very clear and deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. As such, when everyone was abandoned by White Phoenix and was about to face death, that was why they were so indignant and agitated. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and the rest all revealed stunned looks. They looked at the defending troops that were collectively fleeing, then looked at White Phoenix in the night sky, revealing mocking smiles. White Phoenix, oh White Phoenix, how did you become a domain lord? The people under your command all rebelled. A dignified domain lord, in order to drag out an ignoble existence, actually fled alone without a word. In order to stall for time, you actually sacrificed several tens of thousands of soldiers as cannon fodder. Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi's cold laughter spread throughout the entire Flowing Chuan Pass. The 40,000 soldiers' emotions became even more agitated, shouting for White Phoenix to open the divine formation and let them out. Divine King White Phoenix was unable to restrain his anger. He was so angry that his face turned black. Surging, killing, intent flames surged out from his entire body. He glared at Ji Tianxing and the rest and shouted coldly, "Don't be smug. Even without those 40,000 soldiers, this king can also trap you all." Finished talking, he looked at the 40,000 soldiers inside flowing Chuan Pass again and said in a dignified tone, "Soldiers, your bravery, fearlessness, and loyalty. This king has seen it all. To be able to have such loyal and brave soldiers like you is this king's honor and pride." But everyone saw that the enemy's strength was too strong and also too sinister and cunning. If this king fights a bloody battle with you to the end, not only will you die here, this king may also lose his life. But this king is shouldering the heavy responsibility entrusted to me by the divine envoy, and I cannot fail to live up to the trust of His Majesty, the God Emperor. In order to complete the mission and seal the enemy here, this king can only do this. This prince believes that the soldiers are all people with a strong sense of righteousness. In order to protect the Fire Mulberry region, and for the glory of His Majesty, the God Emperor, you will understand this king, right? Divine King White Phoenix's words immediately calmed the anger of many people. Many divine lords and soldiers revealed thoughtful expressions. Some of them even nodded in agreement. After all, Bai Feng had spoken the truth with a sincere tone. She was also very humble. This was a very smart move. If he still put on an arrogant attitude at this time, the 40,000 soldiers would definitely not work for him. However, just as the soldiers were wavering and hesitating, Jiang Tianyi said, "That's right. The divine King White Phoenix that all of you respect and worship only has this bit of strength. He misjudged our strength and rejoiced in grandiose achievements. That's why he set up an ambush at Flowing River Pass, hoping to catch all of us in one fell swoop. In the end, he caused the death of 3 divine kings under him, and even sent 160,000 soldiers to their deaths. But he doesn't care about the lives of ants like you. Anyway, there are tens of billions of people in the Fire Mulberry region, and the death of 100,000 is nothing. Furthermore, he is more afraid of death than any of you. After all, he is the region lord and has enjoyed all the glory and wealth. How can he die here with ants like you? It's fine if he escapes alone. He only needs to say a few words to obtain your forgiveness and make you willingly send yourselves to your deaths. When all of you are dead, he will turn and run. Anyway, all of you won't be able to see." The rumbling voice spread throughout Flowing River Pass, allowing the 40,000 soldiers to hear it clearly. Immediately, many of the wavering and hesitant soldiers revealed indignant looks. Jiang Tianyi exposed White Phoenix's thoughts. Many of the soldiers and divine lords started to cause a ruckus again. White Phoenix was so angry that his eyes were about to split open. He wished that he could tear Jiang Tianyi into pieces. He cursed with a voice like muffled thunder. "Jiang Tianyi, you despicable and shameless bastard, don't slander me." "Ha ha ha." Jiang Tianyi looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. He asked back, "What? Your true colors were exposed by this king, and you became angry from embarrassment? Do you think that your little bit of thoughts can be hidden from the 40,000 soldiers? Do you dare to swear to the heavens that you have never thought of this before?" This king, White Phoenix, subconsciously wanted to raise his hand and swear, but his hand was raised halfway, and he forcibly retracted it. What a joke. Swearing to the heavens, this sort of thing, it was best not to do it so easily. Otherwise, the oath would really come true. Even if White Phoenix was a high divine king, he also had to maintain reverence towards the heavens. After all, the stronger one was, the more reverence one would have towards the heavenly Tao. Seeing White Phoenix stuck, Jiang Tianyi laughed coldly and mockingly. He pointed at him and shouted to the 40,000 soldiers, "Do you see that? White Phoenix is ashamed and does not dare to swear at all. You are all abandoned pawns, cannon fodder that is helping him to buy time." T. White Phoenix was so angry that he cursed loudly. He did not care about his demeanor as a region leader at all. He roared angrily, "Jiang Tianyi, this king is going to turn you into ashes." As he roared, White Phoenix used his arts to control the 6 divine formations and released sharp blades of divine light that covered the sky. They swept towards Jiang Tianyi. "Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, and Yank were all affected, and they hurriedly used their arts to defend themselves. At this moment, Ji Tianxing, who had been silent all this time, suddenly smiled playfully. Lan and Yin Yao noticed his expression and were confused. They wanted to ask him what was wrong. However, before the two of them could speak, a deafening roar erupted from the 40,000 soldiers. At least 3,000 soldiers were agitated and cursed angrily. White Phoenix, you are a region leader who is respected by millions of people, but you are a coward who is afraid of death. Your life is precious, but are our lives worthless? We have 200,000 soldiers working for you, but in your eyes, we are only worthy of being cannon fodder? Brothers, we can't be fooled by him anymore. He wants to live, but we don't want to die either. Everyone, let's work together to break these formations and escape from Flowing River Pass. What *T mission? What loyalty? We just want to live. All sorts of curses and roars erupted from the crowd, echoing in the night sky. The 3,000 soldiers were scattered all over the crowd. As they roared and shouted, they waved their swords and sabers and attacked the divine formations in front of them. The other 30,000 soldiers were already hesitant and tormented in their hearts. Hearing the shouts and roars of the crowd, their emotions were immediately affected. Many people also broke the divine formations and tried to escape. The situation instantly became chaotic. Chapter 34:57. In the blink of an eye, the 40,000 guards were in chaos. At least half of the guards were incited, shouting things like, "I want to live," and attacking the divine formation with all their might. The other 20,000 guards and dozens of high-level divine lords watched the chaos unfold with their own eyes, but they were full of hesitation. Many people did not stop their companions, but they also did not dare to participate easily. But even more people, incited and led by their companions, also joined the ranks of those attacking the divine formation. Seeing this scene, Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, Yank, Yin Yao, and Lana were all stunned. Everyone's expressions were strange, and they exclaimed in astonishment, What's going on? Why are these guards acting like they're on steroids? Bai Feng, who was above Flowing River Pass, was also filled with astonishment, so angry that his entire body trembled. Bastards! You damned bastards! How can you do something like betray me at the last minute? You don't deserve to be Fire Mulberry Region citizens. I'm ashamed of you. Bai Feng never thought that it would be fine if the guards did not help to defend the divine formation, but they actually turned around and attacked the divine formation he had set up. This was simply too ridiculous. However, no matter how much he roared and shouted, it was of no use. The guards who had fallen into madness did not listen to his orders at all. Furthermore, Bai Feng would not be able to kill those defenders. Not only could he not intimidate the guards, but he would also completely enrage them, causing all the guards to rise up and resist. For a moment, Bai Feng was in a dilemma and was also at his wit's end. The only thing he could do was desperately maintain the divine formation's operation and block the guards' attacks. Inside Flowing River Pass, Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, and the others gradually came to their senses and sensed that something was wrong. Everyone looked at Ji Tianxing, revealing inquiring gazes. Young Master Tianxing, this should have something to do with you, right? No matter how cowardly those guards are, they shouldn't be so agitated. Young Master, did you do something? Although I also think that Young Master did it, those people still look quite normal. Young Master can't possibly turn them into puppets in such a short period of time, right? Faced with everyone's questions, Ji Tianxing simply nodded with a smile and admitted it. That's right, I did it. Everyone exclaimed in shock and disbelief. Oh my God. Sure enough, it was Young Master's doing. Young Master, how did you do that? The way I see it, the 3,000 plus defenders were the first to change sides before the others were influenced and incited. Young Master, did you do something to those 3,000 people? To be able to refine more than 3,000 people into puppets in such a short period of time. Young Master, you're going against the heavens. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and explained, I'm not refining it into a puppet. No matter how heaven-defying I am, I don't have that ability. However, Your guesses are correct. However, what I used wasn't a puppet technique. Instead, it was a divine ability that affected one's soul and will. Previously, I had been observing the defenders and picked out over 3,000 of them who were the most agitated and the most cowardly. Then, I used the soul control divine art to trigger the fear and anger in their hearts, making them lose control of their emotions and affect their wills. Naturally, they switched sides at the last minute. The others were also dissatisfied, but they were still hesitating. When they saw their companions fighting back, they naturally joined the counterattack camp. Humans are social animals. Of course, they have a herd mentality. After hearing Ji Tianxing's explanation, everyone was enlightened. Instantly, their faces were filled with admiration and admiration. That's too ingenious. Young master's grasp of people's hearts and the use of divine abilities is simply superb. Sometimes, the one who defeats the enemy may not be the enemy. It may be our own people, ha. Young master, this is called using the least effort to achieve the greatest effect and defeat the strongest opponent. Bai Feng's lungs are about to explode from anger. His face is as black as charcoal. This is simply ridiculous. Everyone was in a good mood. They were full of praise for Ji Tianxing's methods. At this moment, Yun Yao reminded everyone, although those defenders change sides at the last minute, they can help us break the divine array. However, we can't let our guard down. Take this opportunity to break the array as soon as possible. Don't let Bai Feng delay any longer. Judging from his thoughts and intentions, he is trying to stall for time and wait for reinforcements. Everyone understood this point. Without hesitation, they waved their divine weapons and began to attack the divine array. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Everyone released thousands of rays of divine light that shot towards the innermost circle of the divine array like a rain of arrows. Following the loud rumbling sounds, several cracks appeared on the divine light shield within a radius of 10,000 miles, and it began to shake violently. Unfortunately, the divine array was not broken. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing hurriedly said, "Everyone, don't worry. Let me find the flaw in the divine array first. Then we can attack together. Only then can we break it in one blow." Chao Qingyu, Yank, Yun Yao, and Lan are happily agreed. However, Jiang Tianyi frowned and mumbled worriedly, "Young Master Tianxing, isn't this too slow? By the time you find the flaw in the divine array, Bai Feng will have already strengthened the divine array." Ji Tianxing turned a deaf ear to his words. He was using his God's Eye mystic technique to observe the divine array. However, just as Jiang Tianyi finished speaking, he found a weak point. Although it was not a weak point in the divine array, it was just a weak point. However, it was enough for Ji Tianxing. "Look carefully. It's right there," Ji Tianxing shouted. He waved his sword and sent out a ray of golden sword light. It pierced towards the five-colored light barrier 1,000 miles away. Chao Qingyu, Yank, Yun Yao, and the others did not hesitate to use their divine powers. They followed the golden sword light and attacked the weak point of the divine array. "Oh my God, so fast." Jiang Tianyi was shocked. He looked incredulous. He knew very well that Bai Feng was not an expert in the art of array formations. The divine arrays she set up were all mid-grade king grade. Fortunately, they were not high-grade king grade. Otherwise, they would have been defeated long ago. However, even a mid-grade king grade divine array would take a long time to break. He did not expect Ji Tianxing to find the flaw so quickly. Bam! In the next moment, Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and the others' attacks hit the five-colored light barrier with a loud bang. Kaboom! The five-colored light barrier, which looked like a heavenly canopy, was immediately blasted open. A crater with a radius of 1,000 feet was formed. Dense cracks extended all around. The five-colored light barrier was so close to being pierced through. It turned out that Ji Tianxing had found the right thing. Chao Qingyu, Yank, and the others were not excited. It was as if they were used to it. Jiang Tianyi's heart was beating wildly. He was so excited that his mouth was dry. At this moment, Ji Tianxing shouted, "Everyone, let's work together again. We will definitely be able to break the array." Jiang Tianyi did not dare to be in a daze anymore. He quickly drew his divine bow and shot out 4 meteor arrows. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Everyone unleashed their destructive divine power, streaking across the night sky like meteors as they attacked the crater in unison. Kaboom! Along with an enormous explosion that shook the heavens, the 300 deep pit was penetrated on the spot, and it transformed into a large hole that sprayed out fragments of divine light that covered the sky. Chapter 3458. Just like that, the innermost ring's first mediocre king-level divine array was destroyed. Around the hole, which had a radius of 1,000 feet, were densely packed cracks. Cracking sounds could be heard. The appearance of this hole gave the 40,000 soldiers hope of escaping. Without needing anyone to give the order, dozens of Sir Gods and 40,000 soldiers attacked at the same time. They unleashed their most violent divine skills and blasted them toward the hole. They had no choice. It was just a hole. It was not enough to destroy the entire divine array. If all 40,000 soldiers were to rush over at once, Bifone would fill in the hole before they could even escape from the divine array. Therefore, the soldiers cooperated and attacked together. They wanted to expand the hole further. Boom! Crack! In the next instant, an overwhelming number of attacks converged into a 5-colored torrent that slammed into the hole viciously. As expected, with a deafening explosion, the hole instantly expanded by 10 times. It became a gap with a radius of 1,000 feet. The cracks around the gap also became denser and spread faster. Kacha. The crack spread rapidly and soon collapsed. The gap also expanded again. It extended to a radius of 100,000 feet. This time, the damage to the divine array was too great. Even if Bifone tried her best to repair it, it would not be repaired in a short time. This is great. The divine array is destroyed. We can finally escape. What are you waiting for? Run. Territorial Lord Bifone wanted to trap us here as cannon fodder, but the enemy helped us break the divine array. How ironic. What territorial lord? What enemy? They are just divine kings who do not care about the lives of others for their own benefit. They are not good people. Don't waste time. If we don't escape, the territorial lord will repair the divine array. The 40,000 soldiers and dozens of Sir Gods cheered excitedly. They surged toward the gap like a tide. Swoosh! In a short time, more than 40,000 people passed through the gap and escaped the first divine array. However, what blocked them was the second divine array. The 5-colored light screen that covered the sky was only a few dozen miles away. The 40,000 soldiers immediately calmed down. They regained their despair and helplessness. Even though Ji Tianxing and the others had broken the first divine formation and helped them escape, they were still unable to escape. However, there was still a second, third, and fourth divine formations in front of them. A total of 5 divine formations. Don't be discouraged, everyone. Let's work together and aim at the same point. If we attack together, we might be able to break the formation. At this critical moment, a relatively clear-headed high god, Lord, loudly suggested. This suggestion received everyone's approval. Under the lead of that divine monarch, everyone simultaneously cast spells to attack a certain spot on the multicolored light barrier. However, they didn't understand King grade divine formations at all. They just randomly found a target and attacked it. Naturally, it was useless. The torrent of divine light that filled the sky had collapsed, but the 5-colored light barrier was still intact. Fortunately, at this moment, Ji Tianxing had already used his God's Eye secret technique to observe for 30 breaths of time. He found another weak point in the 5-colored light shield. Look carefully. Attack this place with me. Ji Tianxing shouted in a low voice. He held the sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands and slashed out his sword light with all his strength. Swish! The 1,000-foot sacred sword slashed at a certain spot on the 5-colored light barrier with an earth-shattering power. Chao Qingyu, Yank, Yun Yao, and the others had already been waiting for Ji Tianxing to attack. Seeing him slash out a sword light, Everyone also waved their weapons and attacked the weak point of the divine formation with all their might. Jiang Tianyi was no exception. He pulled his divine bow and shot out the most powerful meteor arrows. Of course, he was even more shocked, and his face was full of disbelief. Oh God, Grandpa isn't just a top divine blacksmith. He's also a top array master. He was only able to find the weak point of the first divine formation because he had observed it in advance. However, he only observed the second divine formation for 30 breaths and found the weak point. This is terrifying. Just as Jiang Tianyi's heart was filled with shock, an earth-shattering explosion erupted. Boom! A 1,000-foot hole appeared on the second 5-colored light barrier, and countless divine light shards splashed out. The 40,000 soldiers and dozens of divine lords had attacked twice before, but to no avail. When they saw that Ji Tianxing and the others had joined forces to attack and break the second divine formation, they instantly cheered excitedly. They had a tacit understanding and immediately unleashed their divine abilities with all their might. They unleashed a torrent of divine light that blotted out the sky and blasted towards the hole in the light barrier. Boom! Another earth-shattering explosion erupted, resounding through the clouds. Without a doubt, the divine formation, which was already broken, instantly expanded to a radius of 10,000 feet. Countless cracks also appeared on it. The 40,000 soldiers and the many high divine lords hurriedly passed through the massive gap and escaped from the second divine formation. Then, they learned their lesson. They stopped attacking the divine formation together and waited patiently for Ji Tianxing and the others to destroy the divine formation so that they could finish the job. Seeing this, Divine King White Phoenix, who was in the night sky, exploded in anger, her face turning green. How could this be? This is too preposterous. 40,000 warriors are all under my command. They should be loyal to me and fight against those alien god kings with their lives. Why? Why did they join forces with those foreign divine kings to attack the divine formation I set up? This result was indeed preposterous and inconceivable. Just a moment ago, Ji Tianxing's group and the 40,000 defenders were like fire and water, killing each other. Now, they had stopped fighting and joined forces to destroy the divine formation. Divine King Baifeng had become their common enemy. But such a bizarre and laughable thing had really happened. How could Baifeng not be enraged? She watched as Ji Tianxing and the 40,000 soldiers destroyed 2 divine formations and began to attack the 3rd divine formation. Baifeng could not take it anymore. Her body burned with flames of anger as she glared at the 40,000 soldiers and roared, "You cowardly bastards who betray your masters for glory! Worms! Ants! You are the shame of the Fire Mulberry region. You are wicked beyond redemption and will be nailed to the pillar of shame after death. According to the laws of the Fire Mulberry region, you deserve to die. I will clean up the place now and make you pay for your evil deeds." It was clear that Baifeng was flustered and exasperated, and she wanted to kill all 40,000 soldiers. Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and the others were not surprised by his reaction at all. Of course, they did not have any reaction. They did not sympathize with the 40,000 soldiers, nor did they gloat. After all, the 40,000 soldiers were Baifeng's people. If she wanted to clean up the place, it was her freedom and right. However, Baifeng's actions were too disappointing. Yin Yao and Lan could not help but shake their heads and sigh with complicated expressions. She really views human lives as worthless. Those 40,000 divine spirits would never have thought that the one who killed them would be the region lord they respected and worshipped the most. Sword breaking the 9 heavens, sword breaking the 9 heavens. Chapter 3459. Boom! Crack! Following an earth-shattering explosion, the 3rd divine formation was destroyed by Ji Tianxing's group and the 40,000 defenders. However, the 40,000 defenders charged through the gap without any regard for their own safety, only to be met with an incomparably tragic massacre. Baifeng, who was furious to the point of going berserk, controlled the 4th divine formation and released the most violent killing move. Whoosh! 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 Hundreds of millions of saber lights, sword lights, and spear shadows flew out from the five-colored light barrier, as well as towering divine flames, ice blades, and frost swords. All kinds of divine technique attacks poured down like a torrential flood, drowning the 40,000 defenders. Bam, 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 kacha, kacha, heart-wrenching screams, anguished roars, and the muffled sounds of divine techniques colliding erupted one after another. The entire flowing river pass was in chaos, completely becoming a world of divine light torrents. How could those 40,000 celestial gods possibly withstand the onslaught of a king-grade divine formation? In less than 10 breaths of time, 80% of the soldiers were slaughtered. All of them were torn to shreds by the divine light and turned to ashes. The few thousand defenders who were lucky enough to survive, as well as the dozens of high-ranked divine lords, also suffered considerable injuries, their bodies bathed in blood. They struggled desperately, frantically fleeing, but could not escape the fate of certain death no matter what. In extreme despair, thousands of people looked up at the sky and started to curse, and roar at Bifone. Bifone, you will die a horrible death. We are your people, loyal and devoted to you. But I didn't expect that we would be killed by you. You evil demon who disregards human life. You are worse than pigs and dogs. You are not worthy of being the region lord, and you are even less worthy of being revered by billions of people. Even if we are all killed by you and turned to ashes, your vicious and despicable deeds will still be carried out. Eventually, the entire Fire Mulberry region will be known by your despicable and vicious ways. Bifone, even if we go to the netherworld and become ghosts, we will never let you off. I curse you. I curse you to be torn apart by lightning, burned to ashes, and never to be reincarnated. Countless heart-wrenching, furious, hopeless, and helpless cries sounded within Flowing River Pass. Bifone became even more enraged. Her eyes were as red as blood, and flames danced around her body. He pursed his lips and didn't say a word. He worked even harder to control the god formation to speed up the slaughter of the several thousand defenders. As for Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and the others, as they circulated their energy to block the divine light that filled the sky, they did not forget to observe the weakness of the fourth divine formation. A short 40 breaths passed. The few thousand remaining defenders and the dozens of high divine lords had all died tragically under the slaughter of the divine formation. Everyone was smashed to pieces, turning into a rain of blood and meat paste that filled the sky, scattering in the ruins. The devastated Flowing Creek Pass finally quieted down. Next, it became a battle between Ji Tianxing and the others and Bifone. Even though Bifone would have to fight on her own without the help of 40,000 soldiers and dozens of godly sovereigns. However, the 40,000 garrison troops and divine lords were not his aid. Instead, they became his hindrance. Now that he had gotten rid of the guards and divine monarchs, he could use all his strength to control the divine array and trap Ji Tianxing and company. It was also at this moment that Ji Tianxing found the weak point of the fourth divine array. Swish! He waved the sword of burial of heaven and slashed out a giant sword that was 10,000 feet long, attacking the weak point of the divine array. Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, Yank, and the others already had a tacit understanding with him. They hurriedly attacked the weak point with him. Kaboom! There was a deafening explosion as a hole that was 1,000 feet wide was blasted open in the five-colored light barrier. Debris flew everywhere. Ji Tianxing and the others transformed into streams of light and quickly passed through the hole, escaping the fourth divine array. There were only 2 five-colored light curtains left in front of them. As long as they could destroy the remaining 2 divine arrays, they would be able to escape Flowing Creek Pass. Seeing this scene, Bifeng's eyes turned serious and her expression turned ugly. I spent 7 days, with the help of a few hundred godly sovereigns and 200,000 soldiers, before I could set up 12 divine arrays. Although they were only mediocre king-level divine arrays, they were enough to give mid-level godly kings a headache. That white-robed brat was actually able to identify the weakness and weakness of each divine array within a few breaths. What kind of monster is he? Could he not only be a divine blacksmith who is proficient in refining weapons, but also a top-notch array master? Facing most godly kings, Baifeng was confident and proud. For example, Jiang Tianyi. Even if it was a six-stage realm mid-level godly king, he did not think much of him. Ji Tianxing was the only one who made Baifeng feel an unprecedented pressure. Not only was this fellow's battle prowess outstanding, being able to fight to a draw with him, he was also proficient in refining weapons and arrays. He wanted to use the 12 divine arrays in Flowing Creek Pass to trap Ji Tianxing and the others here. He was afraid that it would not work. Based on the speed at which he is breaking the arrays, in another 100 breaths, they will be able to escape Flowing Creek Pass. Even if I still have 6 divine arrays as my trump cards, it will not be able to withstand him breaking them. I cannot let him continue breaking the arrays. I have to think of a way to stop him. Baifeng was anxious, but she could maintain her calm and composure. He used all his strength to cast the art and controlled the 5th divine array. It revolved rapidly and frenziedly attacked Ji, Tianxing, and the others. Hundreds of millions of divine light blades poured down like a torrential rain, drowning everyone's figures. All kinds of sword gleams and divine light shadows formed a torrent of torrents and hurricanes as they violently attacked. Yin Yao and Lan Er's situation instantly became precarious. Even Chao Qingyu and Yank could only defend with all their might. They did not dare to be careless. Only Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi could deal with it easily and were not injured. However, Ji Tianxing was worried about Yin Yao's safety. He could only protect her with all his strength and help her block the attacks of the divine arrays. Jiang Tianyi could only disperse some of his strength to help Lan or block the attacks. In this way, everyone was safe and could hold on for a long time. However, Ji Tianxing could not observe the divine arrays seriously. It was difficult to find the weak points of the divine arrays. When Baifeng saw that his actions were effective, he used all his strength to activate the divine arrays and released his strongest killing move. Instantly, Ji Tianxing and the others were in an even more dangerous situation. The pressure also increased. Baifeng realized that Ji Tianxing was especially concerned about Yin Yao and was doing his best to protect her. Thus, Baifeng changed his attack strategy slightly and focused on attacking Yin Yao. He looked like he was going to tear her into pieces. Yin Yao was surrounded by danger and could die at any time. Ji Tianxing was also under a lot of pressure. He did not have the time to search for the divine array's weak points. Baifeng had achieved his goal. He was secretly delighted and couldn't help but sneer. Ha ha! Those 40,000 traders are indeed my stumbling blocks. Without them causing trouble, I can actually trap these people. According to the current situation, I can last for at least half a month. I hope there won't be any more changes. Within half a month, Xing Xiang and the other zone lords will definitely arrive. Previously, Baifeng was still very desperate and helpless. Now he saw hope of success again. He was very confident and expectant. However, Baifeng could not be happy for long. After a short 100 breaths of time, the situation on the battlefield changed. Chapter 3460. Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, and the others could not even take care of themselves. Yin Yao could not protect herself. She had to rely on Ji Tianxing to protect her. She also knew that Ji Tianxing had no time to find the weakness of the divine array in order to protect her. If this continued, it would only drag on endlessly. This was very disadvantageous to them. Therefore, she took the initiative to suggest to Ji Tianxing, "Tianxing, don't worry about me. I will return to the divine pagoda to recuperate now. If you can't break the divine array, we will all be trapped here." Ji Tianxing and she had a telepathic connection. The two of them did not need to say much about the reasons and the stakes. They both knew very well. Therefore, Ji Tianxing did not hesitate or dissuade her. He readily nodded and agreed. Swoosh! With a flash of divine light, Yin Yao entered the Nine Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda and returned to the distorted space-time. She was out of danger. Ji Tianxing also heaved a sigh of relief. The pressure on him was greatly reduced. He continued to cast spells to block the divine array's attack. He also took the opportunity to use his God's Eye mystic technique to observe the fifth divine array. Although this divine array was operating at an extremely fast speed, Bifeng was also constantly adjusting it and using all kinds of methods to cover up the divine array's weakness. However, Ji Tianxing's array formation skills and experience far exceeded Bifeng's imagination. No matter how intricate and complicated the divine array was, it would become clear in his eyes. He quickly analyzed the veins and nodes of the divine formation by following the vines to get to the melon, extracting the silk from the cocoon. Then he selected the weakest and most vulnerable points from the tens of millions of nodes of the array. This process sounded simple, but it actually required a lot of deduction and calculation. Only a monster like Ji Tianxing would be able to analyze the results in such a short period of time, and with such accuracy. Time passed quickly. Soon, 15 minutes passed. Finally, Ji Tianxing found a weak point in the five-colored light screen that covered the sky and the sun. Found it. Everyone, attack with me. Ji Tianxing was energized and shouted in a sonorous voice. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and unleashed 100% of his power. He stabbed out a dazzling giant sword. Shwa! The gigantic sword broke through all the blade lights and sword shadows in the sky and crashed into the five-colored light screen with a deafening boom. However, everyone was exhausted from resisting the divine formation's attacks. It was very difficult for them to attack together with him. Only Jiang Tianyi, who was relatively strong, was able to draw his bow and shoot 3 shooting star arrows at that weak spot. Unfortunately, his and Ji Tianxing's attacks were unable to break through the light curtain, leaving only a crack. Ji Tianxing was not discouraged. With a determined look on his face, he shouted, "Again, Jiang Tianyi, let's attack at the same time." Jiang Tianyi naturally obeyed. When he slashed out with his full strength, he drew his bow and shot out 4 meteor arrows without any regard for his own safety. That giant sword shone with golden light and contained an extremely powerful and mysterious power. This was a completely new kind of power that Jiang Tianyi had never come into contact with before. He felt that it was extremely powerful and unfamiliar. This was because Ji Tianxing had used the power of the 5 elements to execute the world slash. Kaboom! Amidst a loud boom, the world slash and the meteor arrows hit the 5-colored light screen at the same time. The light screen, which was as thick as a wall, was instantly blasted a few hundred feet wide hole in it. Thousands of pieces flew everywhere. After the successful attack, Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi hurriedly covered everyone, passing through the sky full of saber lights and sword shadows, rushing out of the gap. Shwa! In the blink of an eye, everyone had escaped from the 5th divine formation and arrived at the edge of the flowing river pass. There was only one light screen left in front of them. Jiang Tianyi was excited. He said happily, "There's only one divine formation left. Let's work together to break this divine formation. Then we can surround Bifeng and kill that old bastard." Chao Qingyu, Yank, and Lan were filled with relief and anticipation. They were clearly much more relaxed. However, Ji Tianxing was still expressionless. He frowned and observed the divine formation's light screen. His eyes were focused and cautious. At the same time, Bifeng gave up on the 5th divine formation and controlled the 6th divine formation to attack again. The divine formation's light screen, which was thousands of miles wide, released all kinds of divine abilities and killer moves toward Ji Tianxing and the others. As he controlled the divine formation to attack, he thought to himself, that method just now worked. His speed of breaking the divine formation slowed down significantly. It even took him close to 15 minutes. However, if this continues, even if I still have 6 divine formations as my trump card, I can only delay them for 2 hours. The power of one divine formation is not enough. I have to activate the other divine formations in advance. After making up his mind, Bifeng used one hand to control the 6th divine formation. His other hand used a divine ability to activate the 3 hidden divine formations. Shwa, shwa. A moment later, 3 more light screens lit up in the night sky outside the flowing river pass. One light screen was formed by divine lightning. It flashed with billions of lightning arcs and looked very violent. The other screen of light was condensed from blood flames, and the annihilation divine flames that could incinerate the heavens and obliterate the earth rose with terrifying might. The third light screen was rainbow-colored. It was formed by more than 120 types of laws and divine powers. It was unpredictable. Under Bai Feng's control, the 3 divine formations sped up and released all kinds of divine abilities and killer moves toward Ji Tianxing and the others. Boom! Bam! 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 Swish! 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 Damn it! He still has a trump card. He set up more than 6 divine formations in the flowing river pass. Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi felt the pressure increase. They could only defend with all their might to ensure their safety. Chao Qingyu, Yank, and Lan were in a precarious situation. They could lose their lives at any time, especially Lan. She was quickly hit by the sword and saber lights. Dozens of wounds were left on her body. Seeing this, Chao Qingyu's heart ached. He was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He did not care about his own safety and tried his best to save Lan. In the end, he was also attacked by the endless lightning and divine light. Soon, he was covered in blood and wounds. Both husband and wife were seriously injured. Their combat strength decreased sharply. If they still couldn't escape from Flowing River Pass, both of them would be smashed into pieces and die in the divine formation. Seeing this, Yank also looked angry. He raised his head and cursed Bai Feng. His defense was very strong, and he could still hold on for the time being. However, it was impossible for him to save Chao Qingyu and his wife. It was already very impressive that he could protect himself. Helpless, Ji Tianxing could only let Chao Qingyu and his wife return to the Green Jade, divine worship, to recuperate. The Green Jade, divine worship, shrunk to the size of a sesame seed and was stored in his body. Thus, only Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and Yank were left in the divine formation. As the number of people decreased, their situation became more and more dangerous. Jiang Tianyi and Yank were anxious. They looked at Ji Tianxing and placed their hopes on him. Young Master Tianxing, we can't go on like this. We can only hold on for a few more days. Our divine power will weaken. My lord, please think of something. Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment. Then, he said in a low voice, hold on a little longer. I have an idea. Chapter 3461. Upon hearing Ji Tianxing's words, Jiang Tianyi and Yank's eyes lit up with hope. Master, have you thought of a way? Yanke was filled with anticipation as he asked subconsciously. But Ji Tianxing didn't answer. In a flash of white light, he disappeared. He was nowhere to be found in the entire Flowing River Pass. Only his divine soul was present. Jiang Tianyi and Yank both realized that Ji Tianxing hadn't turned invisible. He had truly disappeared. But even though he had disappeared from the divine array, his aura remained in the divine array. Jiang Tianyi and Yank were both surprised and incredulous by this bizarre occurrence. In fact, Ji Tianxing had used the ultimate skill of the infinite sky of chaos. He had become one with the heavens and earth. He didn't exist, but he was everywhere. In this way, the hundreds of thousands of Abhijnas released by the 4 Abhijnas and the billions of saber lights and sword shadows couldn't do anything to him. Not only had he disappeared, but he was also invincible. Unless Bai Feng destroyed the entire Flowing River Pass in one move and reduced everything within 10,000 miles to nothingness. Otherwise, Ji Tianxing's life wouldn't be in danger. At this moment, Bai Feng was still in shock. He could sense Ji Tianxing's aura, but he couldn't find any trace of Ji Tianxing. That despicable little bastard. He actually disappeared? What kind of trick is this? Where did he hide? Bai Feng controlled the divine array to attack Jiang Tianyi and Yank while searching for Ji Tianxing. Unfortunately, 15 minutes had passed, but he still couldn't find Ji Tianxing. During this time, Ji Tianxing focused on observing the divine array and wasn't disturbed. He finally found the sixth divine array's weak point. Then he reappeared in the divine array, next to Jiang Tianyi. Jiang Tianyi, attack with me, Ji Tianxing shouted solemnly. He waved the sword of burial of heaven and used his ultimate sword Dao skill, slashing out a 30,000-foot-long divine sword. Heaven's splitting sword, Jiang Tianyi also went all out, shooting 6 starlight arrows. Whoosh! Swish! The sky-splitting sword and the 6 shooting stars streaked across the night sky in an extremely dazzling manner. They passed through the countless saber lights and sword shadows and struck the weak point of the divine formation. Boom! There was no doubt about the result. A huge hole was blasted in the 5-colored light screen, and dense cracks extended from it. Taking advantage of the shaking of the divine formation, Ji Tianxing took Jiang Tianyi and yanked through the gap and escaped from Flowing River Pass. The 3 of them had left the ruined Flowing Chuan Pass. However, there were still 3 layers of divine array light screens in front of them. Looking at the 3 light screens, Yank gnashed his teeth and cursed, "White Phoenix, you old dog, you're really despicable and shameless. How many more divine formations have you set up? Take them all out." Jiang Tianyi maintained his calm and said in a low voice, "Even if Bai Feng is a high-level God King, it would be very difficult for her to set up more than a dozen medium-grade king-grade divine formations in just a few days. Therefore, she should only be left with these 3 divine formations." Ji Tianxing frowned and shook his head. Logically speaking, Bai Feng would need 2 to 3 months to set up 9 medium-grade king-grade divine formations. However, he has the help of a few hundred god monarchs and 200,000 soldiers. He doesn't lack the divine stones and materials needed to set up the formations. Within half a month, he would probably be able to set up more than a dozen divine formations. Yank was stunned and a little dumbfounded. Jiang Tianyi frowned and asked with an ugly expression, "You mean that Bai Feng has other trump cards besides these 3 divine formations? What should we do? These divine formations are endless. When can we escape?" Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "It's fine. I'll break through as many divine formations as he sets up. After all, the speed at which he sets up the formations is nothing compared to the speed at which I break them. Within a few hours, we'll definitely be able to escape the seal." With his words, Jiang Tianyi and Yank felt as though they had eaten pills of reassurance. They also felt more confident. After that, the 2 of them continued to defend against the 3 divine formations with all their might. Ji Tianxing used the same trick again and used the limitless sky of turbidity to disappear into the divine formations and focus on observing the divine formations. Bai Feng was as helpless as ever. He couldn't stop Ji Tianxing from disappearing, nor could he find out where Ji Tianxing's real body was. After all, this was the second time Ji Tianxing had used the limitless sky of turbidity in front of him. He wasn't a monstrous genius like Ji Tianxing. How could he see through it so quickly? With nowhere to vent his anger, Bai Feng became even more aggressive and attacked Jiang Tianyi and Yank even more ferociously. Jiang Tianyi was fine. He was quite strong and had a medium-grade king-grade divine artifact protecting him. He was temporarily safe. Yank, on the other hand, was in big trouble. The super-strong defense of the Rock Tribe was no longer of any use. Soon, he was covered in wounds and bloodstains from the attacks of the 3 divine arrays. However, he was stubborn. He gritted his teeth and persevered. He didn't even cry out in pain because he was afraid that Ji Tianxing would be distracted. Moreover, he didn't enter the divine tower to heal. Jiang Tianyi tried to persuade him, but he shook his head and refused. He explained, "These superficial wounds are nothing to the rock race. Everyone has retreated to heal. There are only the 3 of us left. I can't back down and let you and the Lord fight alone." Jiang Tianyi looked at him in surprise and gave him a thumbs up when he heard his deep but determined voice. Soon, half an hour passed. Ji Tianxing was quite injured and had used up a lot of his divine power. His observation of the divine formations had slowed down. In addition, this lightning divine formation was obviously more complicated than the previous 6 divine formations. Therefore, Ji Tianxing spent twice as much time to find the weak point of the divine formation. Whoosh, whoosh, Whoosh! Whoosh! He joined forces with Jiang Tianyi to attack the weak point of the divine formation. If they couldn't break it the first time, they attacked a second time, a third time, a fourth time. Finally, after 7 consecutive attacks, the two of them broke the 7th divine formation. The 3 of them passed through the 100-foot wide gap and escaped the seal of the divine formation. They continued to attack the 8th divine formation. Compared to the previous divine formation, this one was more complicated and more complete. Ji Tianxing used the same trick again and had to spend more time to find the weak point of this divine formation. Just like that, time continued to pass. Another hour later, the 3 of them broke through the 8th divine formation and continued to face the 9th divine formation. Ji Tianxing's speed of breaking the divine formation was getting slower and slower. However, compared to all the God Kings, this was still a heaven-defying speed. Bai Feng's expression darkened. His heart clenched, and he was extremely anxious. In order to slow down Ji Tianxing's speed, he had to activate the last 3 divine formations in advance. Whoosh! 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 Another 3 screens of light lit up, covering a radius of more than 10,000 miles. As Bai Feng controlled the divine array to unleash devastating attacks, she thought to herself, it's no wonder that celestial aspect emissary was defeated by him. This brat is truly a monstrous genius. This king is really unlucky. Why did I meet such a perverted guy? I've used up all my trump cards. In 4 hours at most, this king will have to run for his life. Book Guest Residence Reading Website. Chapter 3462. However, Bai Feng had already predicted the outcome. No one in the entire Fire Mulberry region could help him. Only Stellar Aspect Ambassador and the other region lords were qualified to help and save him. But those Divine King powerhouses needed around 8 days at the fastest before they could reach the Flowing Creek Pass. No matter what, Bai Feng would not be able to hold on until then. Stellar Aspect Ambassador, I've already tried my best. Bai Feng looked up at the night sky in the north and sighed silently in his heart. Soon, another 2 hours passed. Ji Tianxing had also broken through the 9th divine array, creating a 1,000-foot wide gap. Ji Tianxing led Jiang Tianyi and yanked through the gap and continued to attack the 10th divine array. The last 3 divine arrays were each more complicated than the last, and their defensive power was also stronger. Ji Tianxing and the other 2's power continued to weaken, causing the time needed to break through the divine arrays to become longer and longer. In the process of breaking through the divine arrays, Ji Tianxing had considered using the spatial transference divine ability to teleport thousands of miles away. That way, he would not need to break through the divine arrays to escape the seals of the dozen or so divine arrays. However, this idea was not realistic. The 12 King grade divine arrays that Bai Feng had set up all had the ability to seal space. Therefore, Ji Tianxing could only proceed step by step and break the divine formations one by one. Time passed very slowly. To Bai Feng, every minute and every second was especially torturous. 3 hours later, the 10th divine array was broken through, and the pressure on Ji Tianxing and the other 2 was greatly reduced. 6 hours later, the 11th divine array was broken through as well. There was only 1 divine array left in front of Ji Tianxing and the other 2. The pressure on them decreased once again, and their expressions were clearly much more relaxed. However, Bai Feng's expression was as cold as ice, and his eyes were filled with disappointment and unwillingness. In the end, we have failed miserably and are powerless to reverse the situation. He sighed in his heart as he tried his best to control the divine array, to kill Ji Tianxing and the other 2. However, defeat was inevitable. No matter how hard he tried, he could not change the outcome. 2 hours later, this divine array was also cracked by Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi. Even though both of them were panting from exhaustion, their divine powers were weak, and their auras were unstable and chaotic. However, if they attacked 100 more times, they would be able to break through the 5-colored light screen and rush out of this divine formation. At this moment, Bai Feng had completely given up all hope. He stopped controlling the divine formation and gave up on struggling. He said to Ji Tianxing, Tianxing, I have to admit that I have underestimated you. With your talent, strength, and methods, you'll definitely be unrivaled in the world in the future and become a well-known figure among divine kings. But in the end, you are only a god king. You will never be able to escape the rule of His Majesty, the God Emperor. As early as 1,000 years ago, the world had already changed. In the present boundless heaven continent, the God Emperor reigned supreme. No one could go against his will. The power of the God Emperor realm is not something you can imagine. Even if you can kill this king, Oracle Xing Xiang, and even more domain lords and divine envoys. But so what? In the end, you will die under the siege of so many god kings. In fact, His Majesty the God Emperor only needs one palm to easily crush all of you. At this moment, Bai Feng's anger had already subsided. His emotions were calm and steady. The words he said were also sincere and came from the bottom of his heart. Among them, there was a faint trace of helplessness. After pausing for a moment, he continued, 1,000 years ago, it was indeed the various great paradises that controlled the continent and looked down on the common people. But that is already history. Whether it is you or me, we can no longer immerse ourselves in the glory of the past. The world has already changed. If you want to live on peacefully, you can only give up on unrealistic delusions. This king has said all that I have to say. Take care of yourselves. With that, Divine King Bai Feng sighed and turned to fly away. Swoosh! He transformed into a scarlet flame and rapidly disappeared into the horizon, escaping without a trace. Inside the divine formation, Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi were still attacking the divine formation together. Yank ignored his miserable injuries and pointed in the direction that Bai Feng escaped. He cursed angrily. That old bastard! How could he be so cowardly? When he saw that we were about to break through the last formation, he knew that his life was in danger and actually fled in advance. Jiang Tianyi said in a neutral tone, Actually, we are all heavily injured and weak. If Bai Feng fought a bloody battle with us, he might not lose. But he was too cautious and would rather give up a little hope than take the risk. Ji Tianxing recalled Bai Feng's words and revealed a thoughtful expression. He said, An old and cunning fellow like him naturally has his own way of survival. Being greedy and advancing rashly is not a good thing. Only by being cautious can one live long. Moreover, Bai Feng has no enmity with us. He was just following orders. He has already sacrificed 3 god kings, hundreds of elites, and an army of 200,000. There is no need for him to throw himself in as well. Jiang Tianyi and Yank nodded in agreement. After a moment of silence, Yank asked, Master, what did he mean by those words he said before he fled? Ji Tianxing frowned. He probably misunderstood our intentions and felt the same way. That's why he said those words. Speaking of which, this person is actually not annoying. In fact, there is a possibility that we will cross paths again. Cross paths again? Yank revealed a confused expression. He asked in confusion, Master, could it be that you want to chase him to his nest and kill him? Before Ji Tianxing could reply, Jiang Tianyi smiled gently and said, It's not what you think. Young Master Tianxing's words of crossing paths might be friendly. Yank still did not understand. He simply scratched his head and did not say anything else. Jiang Tianyi continued, Actually, I am the same as Bai Feng. We are both disciples of the ancient clans. I can empathize with what he said. 1,000 years ago, the ancient clans were the true rulers of the continent and enjoyed unparalleled glory and resources. However, the Shura God Emperor appeared and swept through the various paradises, unifying the 100 territories. The glorious era that belonged to the ancient clans has passed. We should not be immersed in our memories. We must adjust and adapt to the new situation. Only then can we continue to reproduce and survive. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, Perhaps Bai Feng thought that the Jiang clan and I are working together to fight against the Shura God Emperor. That's why he warned us. Jiang Tianyi was stunned. He said with an awkward expression, That should be the case. After a pause, he asked worriedly, young Master Tianxing, will by phone report this to the god emissaries and the Shura god emperor? If the Shura god emperor thinks that the Jiang clan has thoughts of betrayal, won't the Jiang clan be in danger? Tianxing waved his hand and comforted him. By phone probably won't do that. Didn't the various ancient clans secretly form an alliance? If the Shura god emperor finds a reason to attack the divine attraction grotto heaven, the other paradises will also be in danger. Everyone should understand the principle of being intimately connected. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3463. Originally, Jiang Tianyi was filled with worry. But after listening to Tianxing's advice, he felt much more at ease. The two continued to attack. After more than 20 attacks, they finally broke through the divine array's light barrier. Boom! Crack! There was a loud explosion as a 1,000-foot-wide gap appeared. Outside the gap was the cold night sky where the mountain wind whistled. There were no more obstacles. Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi revealed gratified expressions. Yank was even more excited and couldn't help but cheer. Great! We finally broke through the 12 divine arrays and are about to leave this damned place. The three quickly passed through the gap and left Flowing River Pass. Being in the night sky, the three felt much more relaxed and unrestrained. Jiang Tianyi took out his palace and cast a spell to turn it into a divine ship. The three entered the palace. Jiang Tianyi steered the palace south while recuperating from his injuries. Tianxing and Yank both entered a secret room to recuperate. Yank's injuries were the most severe. Even with the help of divine pills and miraculous medicines, he still needed more than a decade to recover. Thus, Tianxing let him enter the distorted space-time to recuperate under the Blood Flame's sacred tree. Tianxing also entered the distorted space-time to recuperate before cultivating. After all, he had gained a lot from this battle at Flowing River Pass. Qin Yi, Wu Shui, and the sky-smelting divine craftsman had all fallen. Their interspatial rings and divine spark fragments had all fallen into his hands. After recuperating from his injuries, he would count the spoils of war and refine the divine spark fragments of the three divine kings. In the next 2 days, the divine ship formed by the palace passed through the Fire Mulberry Empire without any obstructions. At the same time, slanting Phoenix Mountain in the center of the Fire Mulberry domain, amidst the white sea of clouds, inside a dazzling palace. Bai Feng sat alone in her study, looking out the window at the setting sun. Her expression was somewhat lonely and weathered. Her 2 deputies were dead, and the sky-smelting divine craftsman was also killed. She was the only divine king left in the entire Fire Mulberry domain, and a large number of elite experts had died. The Fire Mulberry domain could be considered to have declined. It would be difficult for it to recover to its peak without a few hundred or 1,000 years. Bai Feng sighed and took out a communication jade slip to contact Celestial Aspect, Divine Envoy. Stellar Aspect, God Emissary. This king has gathered the elite forces of Fire Mulberry region and set up an ambush at Flowing River Pass. We have fought fiercely with those foreign race god kings for an entire night. Unfortunately, we failed. I was unable to capture them and only managed to delay them for 1 night. I am deeply sorry, but I have tried my best. I hope you can understand. Bai Feng briefly reported the results of the battle, then waved her hand and sent out a communication jade slip. Swish! After the jade slip flew away, he sat in the study and waited silently. About a quarter of an hour later, a beam of spiritual light flew down from the sky and landed in front of Bai Feng. This was Celestial Aspect's reply. Bai Feng picked up the communication jade slip and read the message inside with her divine sense. The dignified voice of the stellar aspect, God Messenger, sounded in his mind. Brother Bai, please restrain your grief. In this battle of Flowing Rivers Pass, Brother Bai's loyalty to His Highness the God Emperor can be witnessed by the sun and the moon. In the future, this envoy will definitely personally report to the God Emperor. In addition, the strength of those foreign race god kings cannot be underestimated. It is already commendable that Brother Bai was able to delay them for 1 night. Thank you for your help, Brother Bai. This envoy will remember this favor. Of course, Brother Bai, please be patient. Those foreign race god kings will not be able to jump around for long. This envoy will definitely exterminate them. In this envoy's hunting plan, this is only the beginning. They should be heading south, passing through the Fire Mulberry Domain and entering the Red Dragon Domain. This envoy and 2 other divine envoys, as well as 17 domain lords, are rushing over at full speed and gathering from all directions. We will meet in the south of the Red Dragon Domain and should be able to complete the encirclement there. At that time, no matter how capable those foreign race god kings are, they will not be able to escape from the palms of this envoy. After reading the message in the Jade Slip, Baifeng silently put down the communication Jade Slip and fell into a state of hesitation. From the tone of the stellar aspect God Messenger, this matter should not have been reported to the God Emperor. After all, several domain lords and god kings were killed consecutively. This only proves that he is not capable enough. He must want to ask the other 2 divine envoys for help to kill Tianxing and the others as soon as possible. This is the only way to atone for his crimes. Their encirclement will converge in the Red Dragon Domain. Although the stellar aspect God Messenger did not ask me to help, he did not ask me to rest and recuperate. Should I go or not? Baifeng frowned, silently weighing the pros and cons. In order to kill Tianxing and the others, the stellar aspect God Messenger is making such a big fuss. More than 20 domain lords are rushing over to help. I am so close to the Red Dragon Domain. If I don't go, I will be criticized. Forget it. I will go to the Red Dragon Domain to join the fun. Baifeng made up his mind regarding this matter. However, there was still one thing that he was hesitating about. Tianxing and the others met Jiang Tianyi of the Jiang clan at the Fire Dragon Mountain and traveled together. I don't know what their relationship is and what the Jiang clan is trying to do. Should I tell the stellar aspect God Messenger about this news? Baifeng's fingers tapped on the table. After pondering for a long time, he still could not make up his mind. 20 days passed in the blink of an eye. Tianyi Palace passed through the Fire Mulberry Domain and entered the Red Dragon Domain. Before entering the Red Dragon Domain, Jiang Tianyi was especially cautious when crossing the border. They had been ambushed at the flowing Chuan Pass at the border of the Fire Mulberry Domain. He was too embarrassed to make the same mistake again. However, it was strange this time. The border of the Red Dragon Domain was calm, and everything was as usual. Not only were there no traps or ambushes, but there was also nothing out of the ordinary. It was as if the Red Dragon Domain Lord did not know they were coming. This abnormality made Jiang Tianyi more vigilant. He muttered to himself, "Sir, Tianxing offended the stellar aspect God Messenger. That guy mobilized many domain lords and divine kings to kill us with great fanfare. The Red Dragon Domain Lord did not set up an ambush at the border. Does he want us to lower our guard? Then he will set up an ambush somewhere in the Red Dragon Domain. He wants to catch us off guard and catch us off guard." Jiang Tianyi silently guessed and moved even more cautiously. At this moment, in the distorted space-time of the Jiuqian Ju Pagoda, Ji Tianxing and Yang had been in seclusion for nearly 3 years. Yang's injuries had mostly healed and were close to recovery. Ji Tianxing's injuries had long since healed. He had also counted the spoils of war and was refining the godhead fragments of the 3 divine kings. The space rings of the 3 divine kings had stored a huge amount of cultivation resources. Roughly estimating the value of those cultivation resources was close to 300 billion godstones. Logically speaking, this was a huge fortune. Unfortunately, most of the cultivation resources were of a lower grade. 90% of them were Monarch high-grade and Supreme-grade items. There were less Monarch low-grade divine weapons, divine abilities, cultivation methods, elixirs, talismans, and materials. Ji Tianxing picked out all the Monarch-level divine pills, divine abilities, cultivation methods, equipment, and materials. He kept a few divine pills and materials for his own use. The rest were given to Ji Ku, White Dragon, and Wu Shuang. He stuffed all the remaining cultivation resources, including all the godstones, into the heaven-mending orb for the 5 elements world to absorb. 200 billion godstones worth of cultivation resources was not too shocking to him. However, to the five elements world, it was a terrifying force that could stimulate the growth of the entire world. Chapter 3464. 200 billion godstones could expand the five elements world by at least 10%. With the expansion of the five elements world, Ji Tianqing's power would increase as well. Moreover, Ji Tianqing had refined the three supreme beings' Godhead fragments, and his power would increase tremendously. Even the blood flame sacred tree, which had absorbed 200,000 soldiers, many Sir Gods and three supreme beings during the Battle of Flowing River Pass, had increased tremendously. Now, it had grown another 1,000 feet, and its leaves were luxuriant. The divine power aura and crimson flame that it released were also stronger. Judging by the grade of king-level divine weapons, it was now at the peak of lower king level. Perhaps in the near future, it would devour more experts' blood souls, and it might evolve into middle king level. When Ji Tianqing was refining the Godhead fragments, a thought flashed across his mind. He remembered that Lin Shui had mentioned something to him previously. She had asked if there was any chance for Shui Huan's power to increase again. Sir God Shui Huan was severely injured back then and lost his divine body. Ji Tianqing had used a branch of the blood flame sacred tree to refine Shui Huan's body, allowing Shui Huan to become a high-level Sir God. Now, the blood flame sacred tree had evolved to king level. Ji Tianqing couldn't help but wonder if he would succeed if he took another branch of the blood flame sacred tree to replace Sir God Shui Huan's divine body. If he succeeded, wouldn't Sir God Shui Huan possess a king-level divine body? As long as he worked hard, he would be able to break through and become a real supreme being one day. However, if he didn't succeed, not only would Shui Huan lose his divine body, he might even lose his life. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing decided to reconsider. 1.5 years passed very quickly. The three supreme beings' Godhead fragments were refined by Ji Tianqing. His power had reached the peak of Second Heaven God King, and he was only one step away from Third Heaven God King. At the same time, he refined another 20 types of God Tao laws to increase his power. Now, he had mastered 420 types of laws. In terms of the number of laws, he had more than 10 types than Bai Feng, who was in Seventh Heaven God King realm. If Bai Feng knew this secret, her eyeballs would probably fall to the ground. What the hell? Divine King Tianqing, who was able to fight him to a draw, was only in the second layer of the Divine King realm. The number of divine Tao laws grasped was actually even more than his. After finishing his cultivation, Ji Tianqing got up and stretched. He circled around the blood flame sacred tree to check on everyone's condition. Yin Yao's injuries had already recovered, and she was cultivating in seclusion. The great battle at Flowing River Pass previously enriched her actual combat experience and also let her see the disparity between herself and Divine King powerhouses. She worked even harder in her cultivation and improved her strength bit by bit. Unfortunately, after careful observation, Ji Tianqing discovered that she basically showed no signs of breaking through to the Divine King realm. It seemed like he could only place his hopes on the seventh Divine Pearl. On the other hand, Jiku's situation was a little out of Ji Tianqing's expectations. The time she broke through to the 9th level Divine Lord realm was a little later than Yin Yao. However, she had already reached peak Divine Lord realm and was beginning to break through to the Divine King realm. Although it was difficult to break through to the Divine King realm, it was like crossing a natural chasm. But she had already started to try, and she summarized her experience from her failures, continuously strengthening her foundation. Ji Tianqing could tell that her foundation was already very robust, and she had very high hopes of breaking through to the Divine King realm. At most 1 to 200 years, at least 3 to 5 years, she should be able to succeed. Apart from that, White Dragon, Ji Wushuang, Zhen Hong, Black Dragon, and Qin Yu were all high-ranked Divine Lords. Everyone was cultivating bitterly with all their might, looking like they would not give up until they broke through to the Divine King realm. But Ji Tianqing was clear in his heart that not all hard work could be exchanged for rewards. Not everyone would definitely break through to the Divine King realm if they followed him. Some results were actually predestined long ago. Of course, if a massive fortuitous opportunity appeared, perhaps the outcome would change. Ji Tianqing circled around the sacred tree and prepared to leave the distorted space-time to check on Jiang Tianyi's situation. But right at this time, the burial of heaven's voice sounded out in his mind. I have two pieces of good news. Do you want to hear it? Ever since the burial of heaven became a mid-rank king grade divine artifact, it had not spoken again. This was the first time it had taken the initiative to contact Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was stunned and hurriedly asked, "What good news?" Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes has become a god. The burial of heaven's tone was calm and emotionless. Ji Tianqing frowned and was a little dazed. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes? Which Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes? The burial of heaven was probably a little speechless. After a moment of silence, it explained, "It's the old man you subdued in the profound sky continent. Later, you refined him into an ancient tree, and he has been in the sword world ever since." "Oh, so it's him." Ji Tianqing was enlightened and recalled. He chuckled and said, "It's been too long. I've forgotten about him." The burial of heaven continued to explain, "All these years, it has been rooted in the sword world, desperately absorbing heaven and earth spirit chi and resources, steadily increasing its strength. Originally, it was limited by the body of an ancient tree and could not become a god. But not long ago, I recovered to mid-rank king grade, and the sword world also expanded 100 times. The world changed greatly, divine power was abundant, and resources increased dramatically. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was the first to break through the shackles and become a true god." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said with a chuckle, "Interesting. This old man is tenacious. Even after becoming an ancient tree, he refused to give up hope of becoming a god. Now that he has become a true god, he can break free from the shackles and take human form again, moving freely." He thought for a moment and said, "How about this? Throw Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes into the 5 Elements world and let him protect my father and guide his cultivation." The burial of heaven said calmly, "He is indeed a suitable candidate. The 5 Elements world has transformed and its shackles have been released. Billions of living beings have the hope of becoming a god. Your father's aptitude is not too high, and he is still in the tribulation realm. With the protection and guidance of Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes, he will definitely be able to safely pass the 9 tribulations and become a martial saint." Ji Tianqing said with a smile, "I have refined the 5 Elements world and placed it in the heaven-mending pearl. Even if those living beings become gods, they will not be able to ascend to the god realm." The burial of heaven agreed. "This is also the reason why Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes is so anxious. That is why I am informing you. Of course, the 5 Elements world is not weaker than the god realm, so there is no need to ascend." Ji Tianqing stopped discussing this matter and asked, "What is the second good news?" The burial of heaven said calmly, "The Gold Mountain King has also become a god." "The Gold Mountain King?" Ji Tianqing was startled. With his previous experience, he thought for a moment and guessed the answer. "The leader of the Earth Spirit clan in the Sword World, right?" "Yes." The burial of heaven replied and added, "The Earth Spirit clan has already multiplied to 100,000 people, and there is no lack of martial gods and martial saints among them." Ji Tianqing was quite surprised and found it hard to believe. "Those dwarves are quite fertile." "Huh? I haven't paid attention to them for many years, and they have actually grown to this extent? It seems that the Earth Spirit clan is worth nurturing, and they will be useful in the future." "Understood." The burial of heaven replied and fell into a long silence, no longer speaking. Chapter 3465. Even though Ji Tianqing was already a divine king, he would only look forward and set his sights on the higher realms of the divine path and formulate a long-term plan for revenge. He would not linger on the past, nor would he waste time in reminiscing. Wuhan had not been found, and the 5 god emperors were still high above, ruling the divine realm. His blood feud had not been avenged, and the world was not at peace. But he also knew that after reaching the Divine King realm, the progress of one's strength would definitely slow down. Ordinary Divine King experts might only be able to break through one realm after several thousand or 10,000 years. Even a monstrous genius like him would have to spend dozens to hundreds of years before he could gradually increase his cultivation base. During this process, he would pay attention to the five elements world and the sword world. When the time was right, he would secretly help and nurture the living beings of these two worlds. To him, the living beings of the five elements world and the sword world were the foundation of his people, the foundation of his future forces. It might be difficult for them to achieve anything in the next 1,000 years. But thousands of years, 10,000 years later, perhaps by then, the Earth Spirit clan of the Five Elements world and the Sword world would have a large number of divine lords and a small number of divine kings. That would be his people and forces. Creak, creak, creak. The stone door of the secret room opened. Ji Tianqing walked out of the secret room and came to the main hall of Tianyi Palace. Jiang Tianyi was sitting cross-legged in the main hall, silently healing himself while driving the palace south. He had to drive the palace and could not heal himself in seclusion. In this state of healing, his injuries recovered very slowly, and he had only recovered 70%. But he loved cleanliness, and his tattered white crane cloak had long been replaced with a new one, and his messy white hair was neatly combed. "Tianyi, where are we now?" Ji Tianqing walked in front of him and asked. Jiang Tianyi opened his eyes and greeted him, replying, "Young Master Tianqing, we just entered the Red Dragon domain not long ago." Ji Tianqing nodded and asked, "When crossing the border between the two domains, did you encounter any ambushes?" Jiang Tianyi shook his head and said with a serious expression, "Ever since the battle at Flowing River Pass, we have not encountered any ambushes. The Red Dragon domain has not reacted at all. But the more it is like this, the more I feel strange and uneasy." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and analyzed. Ever since the Azura God Emperor unified the entire boundless heaven continent, it has been peaceful for 1,000 years. Those divine envoys and domain lords were all arrogant. Now that something like this had happened, they would definitely not let the matter rest, nor would they try to keep the peace. Especially Stellar Aspect Emissary. He will definitely gather many domain lords and deity kings to kill me. It was just that the news of the defeat at Flowing River Pass had just spread out. They definitely had to act cautiously. In fact, they might even reformulate their plans and not be in a hurry to act. But the next time they make a move, it will definitely be a thunderous strike. That makes sense. Jiang Tianyi nodded in agreement and said in a low voice, 10 days ago, I sent a message to the Divine Attraction Paradise and asked the Jiang clan spies to help me gather information. At the same time, I also sent a message to a friend in Shemi Paradise, asking her to help me investigate the situation in the surrounding regions. I reckon it won't be long before they get back to me." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Shemi Paradise is best at gathering information and has eyes and ears all over the world. But the people of Shemi Paradise don't care about family and only care about money and benefits. You actually have friends?" Jiang Tianyi was stunned for a moment. For some reason, his face turned red and his gaze was a little evasive. Looking at his posture, Ji Tianqing vaguely understood something. Jiang Tianyi was a little embarrassed and hurriedly changed the topic, asking, "Young Master Tianqing, may I ask, how did you become enemies with Stellar Aspect Emissary?" Ji Tianqing replied casually, "At the beginning, I only became enemies with two domain lords. Those two domain lords suffered losses and went to Stellar Aspect Emissary for support. In the end, I killed one of the two domain lords and the other went missing. Stellar Aspect Emissary was also heavily injured by me. From then on, Stellar Aspect Emissary gathered many deity kings and domain lords to besiege me." "I see." Jiang Tianyi nodded and said with some indignation, "Those divine emissaries are very arrogant and domineering. They consider themselves the guards of the God Emperor and don't put anyone in their eyes. In the past, there were a few divine emissaries who went to Divine Attraction Paradise and all of them were very arrogant and arrogant. Anyone who offended them would be charged with the crime of disobeying the God Emperor and rebelling against the God Emperor. But in reality, many divine emissaries are even inferior to those domain lords. In the eyes of us ancient clan disciples, those divine emissaries are the lackeys of the God Emperor, and the most arrogant and despicable ones. Seeing Jiang Tianyi's reaction, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but ask, "You must know that I killed a domain lord and offended a divine emissary. Aren't you worried?" "Worried about what?" Jiang Tianyi asked subconsciously. Ji Tianxing said, "About getting into trouble." TCH, Jiang Tianyi didn't think much of it and said with a smile, "What's there to be afraid of? You only killed a few domain lords and offended a divine emissary, not the Azura God Emperor. Our divine attraction paradise has been passed down for tens of thousands of years. Why would we be afraid of a mere divine emissary?" The two chatted for a while, and Ji Tianxing told him to treat his injuries well. Jiang Tianyi said that he was fine and that his injuries had mostly healed. At this time, a stream of light suddenly flew down from the sky and landed in front of Jiang Tianyi. Jiang Tianyi's face lit up with joy, and he reached out to pick up the communication jade slip, saying, "They must have found out." As he spoke, he used his divine sense to read the information in the jade slip. However, after reading the information in the jade slip, his expression became a little strange. Ji Tianxing asked, "What's wrong? What happened?" Jiang Tianyi explained, "It wasn't them who replied. It was ninth brother who asked me for help. 2 years ago, the clan sent me and 3 other brothers to the secular world to gain experience and recruit refining geniuses for the clan to replenish new blood. Ninth brother Jiang Tiansheng is my half-brother from a different mother. We lived close to each other while the other 2 brothers went far away. One was in the south and the other was in the east. Jiang Tianxing stayed in the Hengshan region for half a year and spent a lot of effort to find 2 refining geniuses. He wanted to recruit them back to the Jiang clan. He didn't expect the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect's second senior brother Chen to also be in the Hengshan region. After Chen heard the news, he rushed to intercept Jiang Tiansheng and snatch the 2 refining geniuses. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing frowned. 100 Refinement Ancient Sect? Second disciple Chen Lan? Jiang Tianyi raised his head and looked at him, asking, "Young Master Tianxing, you know about the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect? You know Chen Lan?" Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "As for the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect, you mentioned it before. Just like the Jiang clan, the Nangong clan, and the Raging Flame Grotto, it's an ancient clan that's proficient in crafting weapons. However, to be honest, the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect's knowledge of refining is slightly better than the other clans.